Chapter 383. On the 9th floor of Green Cliff Immortal Market, Eminent Cloud Sect's Luo Ling Pavilion. The furnishings in this place were elegant and dignified. A few low shelves made of spirit jade were placed on top of them, on which were placed a dozen treasures that looked rather crude and inconspicuous at first glance. These treasures were all protected by talismans, and even the weakest one was a lower-grade spirit item. Placed right in the middle of the room was a 3 feet and 6 inches long red damask silk, which was protected by numerous restrictive talismans and talismans. It was even a lower-grade immortal item. Sitting upright on a large chair in Luo Ling Pavilion, Wuqi narrowed his eyes and glanced around. Eminent Cloud's sect was indeed worthy of being the #1 sect in Puyo Heavenly Realm, as they could actually sell lower-grade immortal items in their shops. And this was under the circumstance that the resources in Puyo Heavenly Realm were far less abundant than those in Myriad Immortals Planet. Despite that, they were still able to display lower-grade immortal items on their counters. At the very least, it meant that Eminent Cloud's sect was able to gather a great amount of precious materials to craft immortal items, and they must have a grandmaster craftsman, or else they would not be able to craft qualified immortal items. Some itinerant heaven immortals in Puyo Heavenly Realm who did not have any powerful backers were still using ordinary spirit items. Not every heaven immortal could own an immortal item. In the spacious parlor on the 9th floor of Luo Ling Pavilion, Wuqi and Princess Zhanglu were sitting side by side. Opposite them were a few executing disciples of Luo Ling Pavilion with unsightly faces. However, they were all frightened by Wuqi's brutal and violent means, and dared not to look into Wuqi's eyes. Taoist White Sparrow, whose face was very unsightly, alternating between pale, green, and red, was sitting on the upper hand of Wuqi, whose face was very unsightly. His most important treasure, the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, was snatched away by those celestial fiend puppets. His mind was in a mess, and he had long lost his composure. His mind was blank, and he did not know what to do next. He could not figure out why the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag could not deal with those few celestial fiend puppets. Wuqi stole a glance at White Sparrow. Of course, he would not tell White Sparrow that celestial fiend puppets were just puppets, and did not have their own souls. So, how could they be restrained by the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag? He was laughing in his mind. According to the information given to him by the puppets, the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was an incredible immortal item, and Wuqi had obtained another powerful treasure. However, Wuqi was a little worried at the same time. Just now, many people in the neighborhood saw the scene of celestial fiend puppets rushing out from his body. I hope no one is stupid enough to tell White Sparrow about this, or else, don't blame me for killing them. Perhaps, it would not be a bad idea to kill White Sparrow, as he had just fused his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls with his innate gold cores of 5 elements, and was preparing to break through this realm with the help of a vast amount of immortal energy, forming his innate nascent soul of 5 elements. Subconsciously, he touched the black dragon spirit ring, which was now filled with several tens of thousands of kilograms of drunken dragon incense. He did not have to worry about a 36th tier heaven immortal like White Sparrow. As long as he did not let Mo1 know the cause and effect of the matter, Wuqi was not afraid of them. A little further up, Patriarch Jiang Yun was sitting right next to White Sparrow with a straight face, while Green Staff and Mo1, the pair of old foes, were sitting right above them, followed by Taoist Min and Taoist Qi, who were staring at each other. Patriarch Yuan Hua was seen sitting cross-legged calmly on a bed in the middle of the room, with a few elders with the cultivation base of heaven immortals standing around him. After a moment of silence, Patriarch Yuan Hua asked in a deep voice, "Where are the fellow Taoists from Luo Ling Pavilion?" A Eminent Cloud Sect's disciple rose to his feet, his body trembling. He pointed at Wuqi and stammered, all of them were killed by this fellow Taoist. The chief supervisor of Luo Ling Pavilion, Uncle Master Yun Wuqi, and the chief manager, Uncle Master Fan Qi, were killed by this fellow Taoist. Patriarch Yuan Hua sighed faintly, then nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist Fan Qi has a cultivation base of early-stage nascent divinity realm. Wuqi, your cultivation base is only at peak stage nascent soul realm, isn't it?" The gap between nascent divinity realm and nascent soul realm is like the gap between an adult and a baby. How did you kill him? After a brief moment of silence, Wuqi rose to his feet and transmitted his voice to Patriarch Yuanhua and all the seniors of Yuanhua sect. I had a fortuitous encounter, and my fleshly body was once tempered by the heavenly Yin true water. Although my cultivation base is only at nascent soul realm, my energy, magic power, and the strength of my fleshly body are comparable to peak stage nascent divinity cultivators. For the first time, Wuqi made a comprehensive evaluation of his overall strength. If he did not rely on all kinds of bizarre divine abilities and mystic techniques, powerful magical treasures and immortal items, and even some evil tricks like drunken dragon incense, judging purely from the strength of his energy and fleshly body, he was truly equal to a peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Another name for peak stage nascent divinity cultivators was half immortal. That was to say, a peak stage nascent divinity cultivator was no different from a 36th tier heaven immortal, except that he lacked the thunder tribulation to transform his energy into immortal energy. Patriarch Yuanhua stared at Wuqi in shock, while Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others turned to look at him in horror. Wuqi touched the black dragon spirit ring with his finger, and a 3 feet tall white jade bottle appeared in his palm. This was the advantage of the black dragon spirit ring. As long as there was something in the ring, the black dragon's soul could fill and store it according to Wuqi's will. Just now, the black dragon's soul took out several tens of kilograms of heavenly Yin true water from the spirit bottle, pouring it into the 3 feet tall white jade bottle. The heavenly Yin true water was transformed from the ice element energy stones that Wuqi stored in the bottle during the past few days. Each drop of the heavenly Yin true water was heavier than mercury, and shone brightly and dazzlingly. Right after Wuqi took out the white jade bottle, the temperature in the room dropped by a large margin. Respectfully, he handed the white jade bottle to Patriarch Yuanhua, then Wuqi said through voice transmission, "I still have some heavenly Yin true water left, and I hereby present it to Ancestral Master. With it, Ancestral Master can temper your immortal body. When you fight Reverend Huilin in the future, Ancestral Master will have a greater chance of winning." When he handed the white jade bottle to Patriarch Yuanhua, Wuqi stared at it without blinking, his eyes filled with reluctance to part with it. Patriarch Yuanhua received the white jade bottle, and his heart was filled with wild joy. Tempering one's body with heavenly Yin true water could make one's fleshly body stronger, more flexible, and able to contain more and purer immortal energy. Once all the several tens of kilograms of heavenly Yin true water were absorbed by his fleshly body, Patriarch Yuanhua was confident that he could elevate his overall strength by 1 or 2 tiers. Although his cultivation base would not improve, his actual combat strength would definitely be equivalent to a 26th tier heaven immortal. With the immortal pills that could heal wounds, and the heavenly Yin true water that could temper one's body, Reverend Huilin would be nothing to him. Patriarch Yuanhua happily shoved the white jade bottle into his storage ring. He noticed the reluctance in Wuqi's eyes. Instantly, he felt guilty and ashamed. As an old man, and an ancestral master, he still had to rob something from his juniors. After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuanhua smiled at Immortal Green Staff and said, "From tomorrow onwards, I'll teach Wuqi, Zi Xian, Xiansheng, and See you the scripture of unity of inaction. Jiang Yun, listen to me as well. You are only 1 step away from 35th tier heaven immortal realm." Upon hearing Patriarch Yuanhua's words, Wuqi was overjoyed. It seemed these several tens of kilograms of heavenly Yin true water were really valuable. Joyfully, he dropped to his knees and bowed to Patriarch Yuanhua, while Patriarch Jiang Yun also dropped to his knees and bowed happily. Taoist White Sparrow was so angry that his face turned pale, and his lips turned red like pig's blood sausages. Wuqi sat back on the big chair. Princess Zhangla held his palm, and only then did he hear Patriarch Yuanhua say with a smile, "It's great that we have such an excellent disciple in our sect. 1 year and 6 months later, we will have a greater chance of winning the life and death match with Huiling sect." Patriarch Yuanhua was smiling happily, and even Taoist Min's eyes were filled with a hint of joy when he looked at Wuqi. No matter what, the life and death match between Yuanhua sect and Huiling sect was closely related to the future of both sections. Although Wu Qi was a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator, his overall strength was actually comparable to a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator. That was a great advantage for both sects. As long as Wu Qi was a little bit more ruthless, he could work together with other nascent divinity cultivators and kill 3 to 5 nascent divinity cultivators from Huiling sect all of a sudden. With that, they would definitely win the match. Even though there was a huge conflict between Daoist Min and Immortal Green Staff, as it was related to the future of both sects, Daoist Min still had a higher appreciation for Wu Qi. While the people of Yuanhua sect were chatting among themselves, a few prominent disciples of Luo Ling Pavilion were sitting on their chairs, shivering. Their hearts were in a mess, and no one knew what they were thinking. All of a sudden, light footsteps were heard coming from outside. Very soon, an old man clad in a pale golden robe, tall and burly, with a dignified appearance, walked into the hall, escorted by several dozens of cultivators. From the corner of his eyes, Wu Qi gave these cultivators a glance. Obviously, the old man clad in a pale golden robe was a heaven immortal, while the weakest among the rest were peak-stage nascent soul cultivators. About 15 to 16 of them had the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm. The old man walked into the hall, cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuanhua without saying a word. Patriarch Yuanhua nodded slowly and said, "You're welcome, Elder Yun. There is some misunderstanding between the disciples of Yuanhua sect and Eminent Cloud sect, and the reason I'm here is to discuss it with Elder Yun." However, the old man, Yun Tianao, the chief elder of Luo Ling Palace in Eminent Cloud sect, the granduncle of Yun Wuqi, said with a sullen face, "Patriarch Yuanhua, there is no need to say anything. It is my fault. I did not teach my son well. How could Yun Wuqi commit such a despicable act? He has tarnished the reputation of Eminent Cloud sect." Yun Tianao sighed faintly, then said in a deep voice, "Our ancestral master has asked about this matter, and he has learned all the details of the incident. This is indeed the fault of our disciples. In a few days, we'll send a new reliable disciple to take over all the affairs in Luo Ling Pavilion, and all the disciples here will be sent back to Eminent Cloud sect for a severe punishment. They have really tarnished the reputation of our sect, and we can't tolerate such villains." Yun Tianao's words sounded righteous, but Wu Qi had a feeling that there were too many things hidden behind Yun Tianao's dignified appearance. His own grandnephew was eaten in front of everyone, and yet, he did not care about it at all. Was he not angry at all? Were all the members of Eminent Cloud sect saints? Impossible. Wu Qi shook his head lightly, but he noticed that Daoist Qi was doing the same thing as him. Wu Qi gave Daoist Qi a look. Daoist Qi narrowed his eyes and gave Wu Qi a faint smile. Upon hearing what Yun Tianao said, Patriarch Yuanhua sighed faintly. He nodded and said, "Elder Yun, please apologize to Reverend Yun. Once I'm done dealing with the miscellaneous affairs in the future, I'll definitely pay you a visit and apologize to Reverend Yun." He gave Wu Qi a look, then said angrily, "Wu Qi, even if you are in the right, killing an innocent disciple of Eminent Cloud sect is still a serious crime. Eminent Cloud sect has a good relationship with Yuanhua sect, and you are being too reckless." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuanhua said sternly, "I'll punish you by sending you to the heart-cleaning pool behind the mountain and face the wall." Chapter 384. The back mountain of Green Cliff Mountain was a vast, primitive jungle with no signs of human habitation. There were countless exotic flowers and trees here, and 90% of the various fresh fruits and flowers enjoyed by Yuanhua sect's cultivators, as well as the ingredients needed to brew various spirit wines, came from here. In order to protect the environment here, Yuanhua sect's disciples were not allowed to enter the back mountain, let alone cultivate here. Once a cultivator began cultivating, he or she would have to breathe in and out natural energies. If a heaven immortal were to cultivate in the back mountain, he or she might consume nearly half of the natural energies stored in the back mountain with just one breath. Therefore, Yuanhua sect's disciples were not allowed to enter the back mountain, as it was so that the exotic flowers and trees could receive sufficient nourishment from the underground energy veins. At the same time, as the heart-cleaning pool was located right in the back mountain, no one was allowed to get close to it. Amidst the ocean of trees, there was a clearing several acres in circumference, surrounded by several dozens of towering trees. A dark green pool was seen reflecting the faint sunlight. Dozens of big and small jade blocks were laid on the edge of the pool, each of which was clearly marked with the marks of buttocks being grinded by the flesh of buttocks. On one of the blocks, there was a mark of buttocks that was about an inch deep. The heart-cleaning pool was the most mysterious, yet also the most useless place in Yuanhua sect. When rewarding disciples, they would be sent here to face the wall, and when punishing disciples who had committed mistakes, they would be sent here to face the wall as well. The only difference was the set of hand incantation used to control the pool. If punishing disciples, they just needed to change the position of the celestial star corresponding to the heart-cleaning pool, and at noon every day, the pool would spray out a bone-piercing cold air and a heat wave strong enough to cook a man. This was the principle behind the so-called tempering of the mind. If punishing disciples, they just needed to lock the few natural energy veins beneath the pool to another celestial star, and at noon every day, illusions of white mist would appear above the pool, showing the movement of celestial stars, the rise and fall of the sun and moon, the blooming and withering of flowers in 4 seasons, and the birth and death of humans. According to Patriarch Yuanhua's experience, these illusions could increase the probability of a cultivator entering the realm of Tao enlightenment by 50%. In the realm of Tao enlightenment, the supreme Tao of the heaven and earth obtained in 1 day and 1 night was comparable to the result of 100 years or even 1,000 years of laborious cultivation. With such a miraculous effect, the heart-cleaning pool had naturally become the most important place in Yuanhua sect. Naturally, those disciples who were sent here for a secluded cultivation were the most outstanding elites of Yuanhua sect, and they were here to receive the rewards. Whether it was punishment or reward, Patriarch Yuanhua just needed to change the incantation gesture. To the outside world, everyone knew that the heart-cleansing pool was a place where Yuanhua sect punished its disciples severely. But, only a handful of Yuanhua sect elders knew the exact function of the pool. Wu Qi sat cross-legged on a white jade block, frowning as he pinched the flaming feathers sparrow, who had its eyes closed and was chirping non-stop. But, as every blade of grass and every tree here was personally arranged by Patriarch Yuanhua, Wu Qi could not simply change the facilities here. Therefore, he had no choice but to bear with it. Patting the bird, Wu Qi poured a bowl of soup which he had concocted in the past 2 days into the bird's mouth. It could improve the purity of bloodline and temper the fleshly body of demon beasts. After that, he fished out the tiny thread of divine bird bloodline. The fire feather sparrow, which was constantly twisting like a flood dragon, gave off a faint heat. As soon as the fire feather sparrow felt this heat, it immediately began to struggle violently. It flapped its wings, which had yet to fully form, and tried to pounce on the blood vein. Wu Qi gave the bird to Princess Zhanglu and cried out softly, "Feed it 3 drops of your blood essence. Quick!" Princess Zhanglu took over the bird. A tiny cut opened up on her fingertip, from which 3 drops of blood glinting with a 5-colored luster flew out and entered the bird's mouth. Wu Qi held the divine bird bloodline in both hands and recited a few incantations. Abruptly, a great amount of red light and heat burst out of the tiny blood, and a long cry of phoenix could be vaguely heard coming out from it. It is indeed the bloodline of the phoenix. Although it is only a tiny thread, I can still spend some time feeding this little thing some soup, and it will eventually transform into a descendant of the phoenix. Zi Xian, if you continue to temper it with your energy every day, this little guy's future achievements will be extraordinary. Wu Qi chuckled, then pointed his finger at the flaming winged sparrow's chest, leaving behind a tiny blood mark, and shoved the blood into its body. A bird cry echoed for several tens of miles, and a red light flickered all over the bird's body. It suddenly expanded to twice its size, and at the same time, pale golden feathers sprouted from its body. A red phoenix coronet feather grew out of its head, and a long tail feather extended from its tail. Each tail feather was shining with a dazzling light, and the patterns on them formed a faintly discernible primordial character. The fire feathers bird let out a few joyful cries, then opened its eyes and saw Princess Zhanglu. A wisp of the bloodline aura that was very close to Princess Zhongli was emanating from its body, and it happily jumped on Princess Zhongli's shoulder. Then, it tilted its neck and curled up on Princess Zhongli's body, falling into a deep sleep. It would take at least a few days for it to absorb and melt this bloodline, as well as the bowl of soup that Wu Qi fed it just now. Wu Qi handed a 1-foot-tall jade bottle to Princess Zhongli and said, "Every 7 days, feed it 3 kilograms of soup. This is the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup I brewed to purify its bloodline and strengthen its fleshly body. It's specially made for demon birds. Feed it 21 times, and it will reach the limit of its current fleshly body. When its cultivation base improves in the future, you can feed it more soup." Princess Zhongli happily took over the jade bottle, stroked the fire feathers bird, and said smilingly, "What should it be called?" "What should it be called?" Wu Qi knitted his brows and said in a low voice, "How about we call it Little Sparrow?" Or Little Sparrow. When it came to naming these little pets, Wu Qi had to admit that he was a little stupid. Princess Zhongli murmured the names of Little Sparrow and Little Sparrow, then nodded and said, "Let's call it Little Sparrow. It sounds similar to Baijuer and Baijuer." Princess Zhongli happily kissed Wu Qi on the cheek, then found a white jade block and sat cross-legged on it. Immediately, she fell into a state of enlightenment. Her aura suddenly became hazy and indistinct, as if she had disappeared from this world. Sitting next to her, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon gave Princess Zhongli a look of horror, then shook their heads helplessly. It had been 7 to 8 days since they came to the heart-cleansing pool to reflect on their mistakes. Even with the guidance of the heart-cleansing pool and the phenomenon in the white fog that surged out at noon, they still had not succeeded in entering the Tao comprehension realm. But, during these 7 to 8 days, Princess Zhongli could enter the state of enlightenment easily, anytime and anywhere, as long as she wanted to. This was a great blow to Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon. She breathed out a heavy sigh, tilted her big head and said, "Didn't he just eat a human? That Yun Tianao seems to be quite reasonable. But, since he has admitted his mistake, why did that old man Yuanhua still ask us to sit here like fools?" Lord Xiansheng narrowed his eyes and said with a cold grin, "Yun Tianao. Reasonable? What do you think, brother?" At noon, Wu Qi fished out several dozens of blood crystals and soul crystals from Black Dragon's spirit ring and threw them to Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon. Face is the most important thing for immortal cultivators, he said coolly. Eminent Cloud sect bowed and admitted their mistake after Cu8 Yun Wu Qi. There must be something fishy going on. Just you wait and see, this matter will not end so easily. Perhaps, something has happened in Eminent Cloud sect, and they can't spare anyone to seek revenge on us for the time being. Or perhaps, they are waiting for us and Huiling sect to suffer a great loss before they strike. In any case, Yun Tianao is a reasonable man. In that case, I'm the reasonable ancestor. A strange howl was heard coming from the bottom of the heart-cleansing pool. A large sheet of white mist soared into the sky, and amidst it, a pitch-black wasteland was revealed. It was a barren wasteland, and rainwater was drizzling down. After that, the grass sprouted, birds flew, and the grasses grew tall. It was a place full of vitality. Lord Xiansheng quickly swallowed a blood crystal and a soul crystal. While absorbing the enormous energy contained in them, he fixed his eyes on the strange phenomenon amidst the white mist, focusing all his attention on it. Meanwhile, Catfish Flood Dragon swallowed all the blood and soul crystals that Wu Qi threw to her, then stared blankly at the white mist for a moment. After that, her body tilted to one side, and her snores shook the sky as she fell asleep. In her sleep, Catfish Flood Dragon licked her lips a few times and said, "Yun Tianao, it looks delicious." "Ugh, I'm the reasonable ancestor. TSK, don't tell me those 2 little girls were bullied by those people from Yuanhua sect?" Wu Qi narrowed his eyes as he recalled the 2 little girls who were rescued by Catfish Flood Dragon. He did not expect that Catfish Flood Dragon had a very strong sense of justice despite her silly appearance. As for the 2 little girls who were being fostered in Greenwood Peak, they also had a very good aptitude in cultivation. The only question now was whether they could join Yuanhua sect to cultivate. If Yuanhua sect did not want them, he would ask Zhang Le to take them as his serving ladies. After sorting out what had happened in the past few days, Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe and focused all his attention on the strange phenomenon amidst the white mist. Princess Zhang Le had an amazing innate talent, as she could enter the state of enlightenment at any time. It was as if she was a drop of water, and the heavenly Tao was a vast ocean. It was only natural for a drop of water to fuse with the ocean. But, Wu Qi did not have such an incredible innate talent. He had to focus all his attention on the white mist, and only then could he sense some vague traces of the heavenly Tao from it. One blood and soul crystal after another kept entering Wu Qi's body from the black dragon spirit ring, and were gradually digested and absorbed by him. His 10 innate spirit embryos were crazily absorbing the enormous energy contained in the blood and soul crystals, growing up gradually. With a single inhalation and exhalation, a large amount of natural energy around Wu Qi disappeared, and all the natural energies in the back of Green Cliff Mountain began to gather towards Wu Qi. Even the natural energies in the underground energy veins began to flow towards him. The speed at which Wu Qi absorbed the natural energies was simply too fast. The heavenly Tao and cultivation experiences from Immortal Changwu, Vagabond Qing-Yi, Immortal Xianyang, and Lady Dark Goldwater inside his 2 fake nascent souls were being absorbed by the innate spirit embryos like tidewater. The 10 innate Jin Dan innate spirit embryos that merged with Wu Qi's 3 separated spiritual souls and 7 physical souls were growing and growing stronger. Gradually, each of them was glinting with a golden gleam, and the light was faintly spreading out from Wu Qi's body. A strange fragrance was wafting around Wu Qi. All of a sudden, a large patch of dark clouds began to form in the sky. The dark clouds took a very long time to form. Time passed day after day, and it was 36 days after Wu Qi entered the state of enlightenment that the dark clouds finally took shape. All of a sudden, the void trembled, and a loud cracking noise rang out. A purple thunderbolt as thick as a thumb struck down from the dark clouds. Chapter 385. The purple heavenly thunderbolts came crashing down. Catfish Flood Dragon, who was sleeping soundly, opened her eyes abruptly, cried out, and spun to flee. She was a demon dragon, and although she could control wind, rain, and lightning, she was most afraid of the thunderbolts of the heavenly tribulation. The thunderbolts produced by the great Tao of heaven and earth could cause at least 100 times more damage to any demon with an evil background. Lord Xiancheng raised his head in horror. A beam of water rushed out of his palm, and the seal of the Dragon King, which was given to the Lord of Longyuan River by the Celestial Court, emerged and hovered above the water. A mighty aura rushed out, and Lord Xiancheng, who was also locked down by the heavenly thunderbolts, was no longer affected by the thunderbolts. This was the special privilege of the immortal officials appointed by the Celestial Court. Unless the heavenly tribulation was specifically targeted at the immortal officials, as long as they produced their own seal, even if they were watching someone transcending the heavenly tribulation at a close distance, they would not be harmed by the heavenly thunderbolts. At the moment, Princess Zhanglu and Wu Qi were also enveloped by the heavenly thunderbolts. Wu Qi was meditating with his eyes closed. A strange 5-colored light was emanating from his body, and a fragrant aroma was assailing the nostrils. White fluid that looked like butter was oozing out of his pores. The fluid flowed out from his body and flowed along the white jade mound to the ground. After absorbing the fluid, the tiny grasses around the white jade mound began to swell and grow, turning from an ordinary weed into a plump Ganoderma grass. Although it was only the lowest grade Ganoderma, the mushroom-like Ganoderma used by mortals as medicine, it had transformed from a weed into a Ganoderma, which showed how miraculous the effect of the white fluid was. Meanwhile, Wu Qi seemed to have fallen into a state that he could not extricate himself from. He did not sense the arrival of the heavenly thunderbolts at all. It was Princess Zhanglu who suddenly opened her eyes. A 5-colored divine light flickered rapidly in them as she casually beckoned at the heavenly thunderbolt. The purple thunderbolt obediently transformed into a stream of light and fell into Princess Zhongli's palm. Under the horrified gazes of Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon, the purple thunderbolt was completely absorbed by Princess Xianglu, and the mysterious and unfathomable aura emanating from Princess Xiangli's body grew stronger. Smiling cheerfully, Princess Xianglu cried out, "Isn't it just a thunder tribulation? Why is it so strong?" Dozens of thunderbolts came smashing down in a row. Princess Xianglu twitched her little mouth and sprung up into the air indifferently, hovering above Wu Qi. All the thunderbolts hit Princess Xiangli's body, but they were all absorbed into her body. The five-colored divine ray behind her transformed into a misty cloud and wheeled around her, while her nascent soul flew out of her body and stared at the thunderbolts that kept falling from the sky with its eyes wide open. All of a sudden, Princess Xiangli's nascent soul flew out of her body and stared at the thunderbolts that kept falling from the sky. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon cried out in shock at the same time. Using a nascent soul to fight against a thunderbolt. That was something that even a heaven immortal would not dare to do. If you asked a heaven immortal to release his immortal soul, which he had painstakingly cultivated, to fight against the thunderbolt, he would definitely use an immortal item and destroy your soul first. Nascent soul, nascent divinity, and immortal soul were all the condensation of one's own soul, just at different levels. As long as one was a soul, he or she would be afraid of thunderbolts. Unless one had cultivated the great Tao of Gold Immortal, and his or her immortal soul had completely merged with his or her fleshly body, making his or her immortal body faintly discernible, while his or her immortal soul had become pure and condensed, he or she would not be afraid of ordinary thunderbolts, astral winds, xian bing, heavenly flame, and many other things. How could Princess Xianglu, with her cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm, use her nascent soul to provoke a thunderbolt? If she used her fleshly body to absorb the thunderbolt, it could be said that her innate talent was extraordinary, or that she had learned some unique thunder-controlling technique. But, using her nascent soul to fight against the thunderbolt? Had she gone mad, or had she suddenly become stupid? Under Lord Xiansheng's horrified gaze, a strong five-colored light suddenly burst out from Princess Xiangli's nascent soul. Not only was it not turned into a wisp of smoke by the thunderbolt, but it had also become stronger and more condensed. The complexion of the nascent soul had become much better, as it flew and danced around Princess Xianglu, then waved its hand at the dark clouds in the sky, causing another thunderbolt to strike down. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon were struck dumb. They exchanged a glance and shook their heads at the same time. Catfish Flood Dragon said in a low voice, "Brother Wu Qi is a monster, and Princess Zi Xian is also a monster. Using her nascent soul to fight against the thunderbolt. Xiansheng, why don't you give it a try?" Lord Xiansheng gnashed his teeth in anger. He gave Catfish Flood Dragon a fierce glare and scolded in a low voice, "Why don't you give it a try?" Catfish Flood Dragon shook her big catfish head and murmured, "I'm afraid of death." "Why don't you give it a try?" Lord Xiansheng was speechless. He turned his head angrily to look at Wu Qi, no longer paying attention to the silly Catfish Flood Dragon. "Do you think I, Lord Xiansheng, am not afraid of death?" The white fluid flowing out of Wu Qi's body gradually dried up, and his body slowly shriveled and collapsed, as if all his blood essence was being absorbed by some strange existence. Very soon, he had become a skeleton that was all skin and bones. But, his skeleton was shrouded in a five-colored auspicious light, and there were even wisps of strong golden light faintly shining from within. Nourished by an enormous amount of blood and soul crystals of heaven immortals, the 10 innate spirit embryos in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians in his arms were growing stronger and stronger. Like the embryos in an egg that had received sufficient nutrition, they were growing stronger and stronger. He had even entered the state of enlightenment of Tao. In just 36 days, he had gradually fused the enlightenment of the heavenly Tao obtained by immortal Chang Wu and the others into his own innate spirit embryos, just like an ordinary cultivator who had cultivated for thousands or tens of thousands of years. If Wu Qi were to study the heavenly Tao by himself, even if he entered the state of enlightenment of Tao, 36 days would be equivalent to thousands or tens of thousands of years of laborious cultivation for ordinary cultivators, and what he could gain would still be limited, as he would have to start from scratch, searching for and capturing the heavenly Tao by himself. But, With Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, and the heavenly Tao epigraph found in the immortal souls of immortal Chang Wu and the others, Wu Qi was basically standing on the shoulders of these immortals, and all he needed to do was to fully comprehend the profound principles of the heavenly Tao they had obtained. The 36 days of enlightenment of Tao had given Wu Qi's innate spirit embryos everything he needed to improve his cultivation base. Crack! Crack! Suddenly, countless cracks appeared on Wu Qi's innate spirit embryos, and vaguely, a strong five-colored light burst out from them. As the spirit embryos broke apart, some useless spirit fluid oozed out from them, flowing out from Wu Qi's body and out of his body. They were the white fluid that was emitting a fragrant aroma. As the fluid flowed out from Wu Qi's body, it brought away some impurities in his body and purified his fleshly body. 10 sesame-sized nascent souls hovered quietly in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians. Some of them were crying, some were laughing, some were dancing, and some were sitting cross-legged. They came in all shapes and sizes, and their expressions were constantly changing. 10 innate Jin Dan corresponded to Wu Qi's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Naturally, 10 innate nascent souls were born from the innate spirit embryos. Once the innate nascent souls were formed, the heaven and earth sensed it immediately. The heaven tribulation came roaring down, but it was stopped by Princess Xianglu, and could not cause any harm to Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi's crisis came one after another. The formation of 10 innate nascent souls immediately unleashed a violent suction force that could frighten an ordinary immortal cultivator to death. Everything inside Wu Qi's body was sucked into the 10 innate nascent souls. Within a blink of an eye, all his power was sucked out, and the energies contained in the 2 fake nascent souls were also sucked dry, nearly causing the 2 fake nascent souls to disintegrate. When Wu Qi's energies were sucked dry, the innate nascent souls immediately began to absorb his blood and energy essence, as well as his life force. Conveniently, it also sucked the nascent divinity that was formed in his spiritual ocean using a mystic technique into the nascent souls. The sudden shriveling and collapse of Wu Qi's body was the result of the nascent souls absorbing his life force and energy essence. Seeing that Wu Qi's bones and marrow were about to be sucked dry by the 10 innate nascent souls, he moved his finger, and all the blood crystals and souls of heaven immortals stored in the black dragon spirit ring fused into his body. At that very moment, all the blood crystals refined from immortal Chang Wu, vagabond Qing Yi, immortal Xian Yang, and the 3 heaven immortals who died in the tunnel of heavenly water dark palace had fused into his body. A loud rumble was heard coming out from Wu Qi's body. It sounded like the collapse of a mountain or the breaking of an ocean. Several thousand blood crystals and soul crystals crumbled, and all their energies were sucked into the 10 innate nascent souls at the same time. The nascent souls, which were as small as a sesame seed, suddenly expanded to about 1 foot tall. They laughed joyfully together, opened their mouths at the same time, and sprayed out 10 streams of extremely pure innate energies that belonged to the 5 elements. Red flame, green wood, white gold, black water, and yellow earth, they enveloped and filled up Wu Qi's entire body in an instant. On top of that, a great amount of blood and energy essence, which was 100 times greater than the life force absorbed just now, was fed back to Wu Qi, filling up his shriveled body in an instant. Cracking noises were heard coming from Wu Qi's body, as his skin cracked inch by inch. 9 layers of skin, which were thicker than the hide of an old cow, fell off from Wu Qi's body, revealing his newly born skin, which was a few times smoother and smoother than the suet jade. The innate energies kept crashing crazily inside Wu Qi's body, as if countless heavy hammers were hammering Wu Qi's body from the inside out, dispersing all the impurities in his body, leaving behind the purest innate flesh and blood, without any acquired impurities. At this moment, Wu Qi's Tao heart was brightly lit. Every thought of the 10 nascent souls, which had been divided into 10 parts, could resonate with the laws of heaven and earth. Suddenly, he was surprised to find that he seemed to possess the same magical power as Princess Xianglu, which allowed him to enter the state of enlightenment with ease. As the innate nascent souls continued to grow, Wu Qi reached out his hand and grabbed towards the black dragon spirit ring. Countless energy stones rushed out like a tide, and the energies contained in them transformed into a blinding white beam and rushed into Wu Qi's palm. An enormous amount of energies kept rushing into Wu Qi's body, and were quickly absorbed and digested by the innate nascent souls, transforming into the innate purple mist within them. After that, they were spat out a huge amount of energies and deposited into all the meridians in Wu Qi's body. The endless mysteries of the heavenly Tao were flying and dancing in Wu Qi's mind. Wu Qi was fully absorbing the mysteries of the heavenly Tao epigraphs from the heaven immortals he killed. His cultivation base and magic power were improving at an incredible rate, and in just a blink of an eye, all 10 of his innate nascent souls were brought to peak stage nascent soul realm. After that, the rapid advancement of Wu Qi's cultivation base came to an abrupt halt, as his corporeal body could no longer withstand the drastic improvement of energies. If he continued to improve, his corporeal body would definitely disintegrate on the spot. The energies contained in each of his innate nascent souls were 10 times more than that of an ordinary peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Therefore, the energies contained in 10 innate nascent souls were at least 100 times more than that of an ordinary peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Putting aside the quality of the energies, the amount of energies in Wu Qi's body was more than enough to fight against 3 to 5 ordinary heaven immortals. The purity of the innate energies of peak stage nascent soul realm was only slightly weaker than the immortal energy. Now, Wu Qi truly had the overall strength to fight against heaven immortals. But all of a sudden, Wu Qi heard a whistling noise coming from a distance. He sprung to his feet immediately and thrust his palm backward, shooting out a stream of flame that burned everything around him, including the wild grasses that had absorbed the liquid form of his spirit embryo mother into Ganoderma grass, into ashes. The cultivators from Yuanhua sect had noticed the commotion, and had finally arrived. Chapter 386. In a flurry, Wu Qi destroyed everything around him. At this moment, he could not care less that everything here was personally arranged by Patriarch Yuanhua. He wanted to erase all the traces that could expose that he was different from ordinary people. However, looking at the tribulation clouds above him, Wu Qi could not help but feel a headache. How was he going to explain the origin of this heavenly tribulation? Why would the heavens send down a thunder tribulation to strike him for no reason? That did not make sense. On top of that, this heavenly tribulation was extraordinarily powerful. Although the power of each tribulation thunder was only equivalent to the minor heavenly tribulation of an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator when he transformed his nascent soul into his nascent divinity, the number was simply too huge. From the first thunderbolt until now, at least 300 of them had struck down. Even the unlucky long bow people did not have such an abnormal thunder tribulation. What kind of excuse could he come up with to fool them? For a moment, Wu Qi was troubled. Princess Zhanglu was hovering in midair, her nascent soul happily absorbing one thunderbolt after another. Clouds and sword beams kept approaching from all directions. Patriarch Yuanhua, 33 heaven immortals, and several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators who were in charge of the actual affairs of the sect had arrived. When they saw Princess Zhongli's nascent soul absorbing the thunderbolts as if it was just for fun, they were all struck dumb. With a blink, Patriarch Yuanhua brought Daoist Qi, Daoist Min, and a group of elders and came next to Wu Qi. He grabbed Wu Qi's arm and asked, "What exactly is going on? Why are there thunderbolts striking down all of a sudden? Are any of you transcending the nascent divinity tribulation? Or is there some other reason? But this thunder tribulation, something is not right, something is not right. How much sin did he commit to attract so many thunderbolts?" Patriarch Yuanhua stared at Wu Qi with his bright eyes, a look that said he would not stop until he found out the truth. Wu Qi spread his arms helplessly and said with a wry smile, "I really have no idea." Indeed, he had no idea that things would turn out like this. The shadowy figure who passed him the scroll of stealing did not mention anything about this. He did not mention that when the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls fused with the innate gene Dan, gave birth to the innate spirit embryo, and finally transformed into the innate nascent soul, there would be such a shocking thunder tribulation. Hundreds of heavenly lightning bolts struck down continuously. If an ordinary cultivator were to be targeted by such a lightning tribulation, they would have long been turned into ashes. How could they be like Princess Zhanglu? All the elders of Yuanhua sect stared at the tribulation cloud in the sky with their heads filled with confusion, then looked at Princess Xianglu, who was absorbing the tribulation thunder under the cloud in an indifferent manner. What kind of abnormal talent did he have to be to treat tribulation lightning as a game? All the elders of Yuanhua sect narrowed their eyes, their minds filled with all kinds of thoughts. Suddenly, Wu Qi sensed a pair of hostile eyes staring at him stealthily. After attaining the innate 5 elements nascent souls, Wu Qi's 6 senses had become dozens of times sharper. Even when an ordinary person's gaze fell on him, it felt like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, and he could sense it like a ripple. Wu Qi followed the gaze and looked over, and saw White Sparrow turning his head away with a gloomy face. So this guy still suspects me after all? He suspects that I'm the one who snatched his Jade Bone's soul-searching flag? His fingers twitched unnaturally. The Jade Bone's soul-searching flag was now lying in the Black Dragon's spirit ring. Wu Qi blinked his eyes at Daoist White Sparrow, and could not help but find it funny in his mind. Even if you know I'm the one who snatched your Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, what can you do to me? Where's the proof? Where's the proof? You are a heaven immortal, and your immortal item was snatched away by a nascent soul junior. No matter how shameless you are, do you really have the guts to tell others about this? Wu Qi could not help being targeted by Daoist White Sparrow. There were many witnesses in Green Cliff Immortal Market that day, and it was impossible for Wu Qi to kill all of them. However, Wu Qi's thought was, even if I snatched it from you, what can you do to me? If they were in Yuanhua sect, you would never lower your face and say that you were robbed by Wu Qi. So, outside of Yuanhua sect, why would Wu Qi be afraid of you, White Sparrow? Grinning coldly, Wu Qi revealed a row of white teeth at Daoist White Sparrow. Daoist White Sparrow's face turned unsightly, as if a layer of frost could be scraped off from his gloomy face. The tribulation clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. The fact that Wu Qi had formed his innate nascent soul was something that the heaven and earth hated out of jealousy. Innate nascent soul was a miraculous existence. Although it followed the orthodox path of Qi cultivators, it was not something that ordinary nascent souls, nascent divinities, or immortal souls could compare with. Innate nascent souls were in perfect harmony with the Tao of heaven and earth. Once they were formed, they would be like cancer cells, constantly absorbing all sorts of principles from the heaven and earth, gathering the essence of the heaven and earth to strengthen themselves. The heavenly Tao had sent a thunder tribulation to attack Wu Qi, and it was just an instinctive precaution. Now that Wu Qi had formed his innate nascent soul, the mystic technique of scroll of stealing had automatically retracted his aura. As the tribulation clouds could no longer sense Wu Qi's existence, they dispersed on their own. Just when everyone thought that this was the end of the incident, all of a sudden, the tribulation clouds gathered in the sky once again. But this time, the tribulation clouds were actually dark green. Amidst the green thunderclouds that came rolling and rolling from all directions, countless silvery thunderbolts were flashing and flashing soundlessly. A frightening, suffocating pressure came pressing down from above. Patriarch Yuanhua and all the elders of Yuanhua sect were struck dumb. Is this the legendary, green immortal destroying thunder? Patriarch Yuanhua tilted his head, uncertain. I think so. This is the legendary green immortal destroying thunder that the heaven and earth sent down when a heaven immortal cultivates the great Tao of gold immortal. Daoist Qi murmured to himself. This doesn't make sense. Someone on Green Cliff Planet has become a gold immortal. Ha ha ha, don't tell me it's one of our disciples. Daoist Qi seemed to be losing his mind. He let out a few dry and emotionless laughs, then continued laughing foolishly. The other Yuanhua sect elders did not say anything. Almost instinctively, they sprung into the sky and fled as far as they could. This was the legendary green immortal destroying thunder that could help one break through the realm of heaven immortals and become a gold immortal. According to the legends, out of 10 peak stage heaven immortals, only 1 or 2 lucky ones could transcend this calamity and become a gold immortal. Even peak stage heaven immortals could not withstand this thunder tribulation, let alone them, who were merely lower tier heaven immortals. Patriarch Yuanhua grabbed Wu Qi and was about to flee. But, Wu Qi flicked his sleeve and shook off Patriarch Yuan Hua. Something is not right, he cried out in a deep voice, the thunder tribulation is coming for Zhangluo. Although it is the green immortal destroying thunder, its power does not seem to be enough. Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken aback. Hastily, he raised his head and sensed the target of the tribulation cloud. Sure enough, it was coming for Princess Zhangluo. But, Princess Zhangluo was perfectly fine, so why would a thunder tribulation suddenly attack her? Patriarch Yuan Hua glanced around and cried out in a low voice, heed my order, elders. Seal off the back of the mountain. No disciples are allowed to enter or leave. Everything that happened today is our sect's secret, and no one is allowed to leak it out. Daoist Qi, Daoist Min, and Chi-Chi took the order from their leader, bringing all the heaven immortal elders and several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators who held the real power in the sect, spreading out in all directions. Numerous restrictive spells were deployed, completely sealing off the back of Green Cliff Mountain, preventing any disciples from approaching. Squatting on Princess Zhang Li's shoulder, little Kair suddenly flapped her wings and flew up into the sky, wheeling around Princess Zhangluo for a while. Princess Zhang Li's nascent soul exploded in midair, turning into a clump of five-colored cloud and mist. The crowd was struck with great shock. Didn't that mean her 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls had completely dispersed? It was a sign that her soul was about to disperse. However, as soon as Princess Zhang Li's nascent soul disappeared, the green tribulation cloud in the sky suddenly sank down like a provoked bull. A deafening rumble of thunder that sounded like the beating of a drum exploded out from the cloud. The deafening rumble shook the crowd and made their blood and qi shiver violently. Even Wu Qi felt dizzy and was pushed tens of miles back. Meanwhile, Princess Zhangluo was hovering in midair, with a faint smile on her face as she quietly watched the tribulation cloud approaching slowly. The 5-colored cloud that had dispersed from the nascent soul transformed into tiny streams of light and rushed into Princess Zhang Li's forehead. Suddenly, the surrounding natural energies began to fluctuate violently. Like soldiers who had just received an order, all the natural energies in the entire Green Cliff Mountain turned into airflows that could be seen with naked eyes, glowing brightly and rushing into Princess Zhang Li's body. The more natural energies Princess Zhang Lu absorbed, the thinner her aura became. Gradually, she became one with the natural energies, and could no longer be sensed by anyone. Wu Qi looked at Princess Zhanglu thoughtfully. This method of hiding one's aura in the natural energies was quite similar to a few techniques in Scroll of Stealing, which could conceal one's aura and hide one's tracks. Many of the techniques found in the Scroll of Stealing were either stolen or obtained along the way. Could it be that the root of these few mystic techniques was related to Princess Zhang Li's bloodline? All of a sudden, the sky lit up, as a green thunderbolt came smashing down from the sky with a frightening rumble. The entire Green Cliff Mountain shook violently, and the underground energy veins were nearly shattered by the thunderbolt. Even though the power of the green immortal destroying thunderbolt had been reduced by many times, just a tiny thread of destructive aura contained in it was enough to make all the heaven immortals present find it hard to bear. Suddenly, Chi-Chi fell from the sky and landed on his back. Princess Zhanglu waved her hand, and a human figure shrouded in a faint 5-colored gleam flew out from her body. The human figure let out a soft song, and immediately, the mountain ridges within 100 miles in circumference trembled. Countless tiny wisterias sprouted from the towering ancient trees on the back of Green Cliff Mountain, transforming into layers upon layers of wooden shields that greeted the thunderbolts falling from the sky. The thunderbolt was incredibly powerful, shattering layer after layer of wooden shields. But, no matter how many wooden shields were shattered, there was still an endless stream of wooden shields coming up to greet it. Initially, the thunderbolt was less than 30 feet away from Princess Zhanglu, but by the time the 3,000th wooden shield was shattered, it was already 10,000 feet away from her. Not only had the 3,000 wooden shields neutralized the thunderbolt, they had also forced the thunderbolt back 30,000 feet. Since the ancient times, when a heavenly tribulation came, one could either dodge it or resist it with brute force. No one had ever seen or heard of someone being forced back like this. All the heaven immortals who witnessed this were struck dumb. Only Patriarch Yuan Hua looked thoughtfully at Princess Zhang, his face filled with an unconcealable joy. She did not form her nascent divinity, but transformed into an innate divine soul. I can't believe this little girl actually possesses the bloodline of the ancient gods. Excellent. Yuan Hua sect has a bright future. Patriarch Yuan Hua murmured to himself with a smile on his face. But Wu Qi heard everything loud and clear. Innate divine soul. Ancient gods. All the knowledge related to this in Lady Dark Goldwater's memories flooded into his mind. The barbarian tribes on Myriad Immortals planet are really painstakingly arranged. Chapter 387. The Ancient Gods. Wu Qi sighed softly. The bloodline in Princess Zhongli's body was indeed extraordinary, and the fact that she was able to activate it at such a young age and form an innate divine soul must have something to do with the innate energy that Wu Qi had injected into her body. Ever since the great Saint Pangu created the heaven and earth, broke through the void, and transformed his body into Pangu continent, all the laws and principles of the great Tao between the heaven and earth had attached themselves to various natural energies, transforming them into gods. This was the origin of the ancient gods. They had no parents, and were immortal. Born between the heaven and earth, they mastered all the great Tao between the heaven and earth, such as the earth, water, fire, wind, rain, dew, cloud, mist, rise and fall of the sun, gale and drought, and even the withering of plants, the vicissitudes of the world. They were the first group of intelligent creatures between the heaven and earth. It was because of the ancient gods that there were all kinds of living beings in the world, as well as the endless magical creatures. In Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, even the emergence of the human race, who were blessed by the great Tao of heaven and earth and enjoyed the status of the spirit of all living beings, was due to the ancient gods. In the early days of the human race, the ancient gods were worshipped by the human race. They protected the human race, and taught the human race the skills and knowledge to survive on Pangu continent in the ancient times. At that time, the ancient gods sat high above the altar, while the human race knelt devoutly at the foot of the altar. However, as the number of human experts increased, especially the cultivators, and then the immortals, and finally, some of them overcame difficulties and became gold immortals, primordial immortals, and those legendary almighty experts. Something that Wu Qi was very familiar with happened. In order to fight for the right to speak and control of the heaven and earth, the human immortals joined hands with other powers and launched endless attacks against the ancient gods. It was a terrible war that lasted for thousands of eons. It was in that war that the Pangu continent was shattered for the first time, and for the first time, all the heavenly realms that revolved around the continent were created. Countless experts fell like rain, and the result of the war was that the ancient gods completely withdrew from the stage, while the human race stood tall on Pangu continent and became the masters of this universe. From the few memories Lady Dark Goldwater had about the ancient god race, Wu Qi discovered that the ancient god race loved to mix their blood with humans the most. As a result, the children they gave birth to with humans would become demigods, possessing a long lifespan and magical powers. As the bloodline gradually thinned out, the descendants of these gods became weaker and weaker, but they still retained some magical powers, such as the ability to predict disasters, the power to communicate with all living beings in the world, and the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead, heal all kinds of injuries, expel plagues, drive away beasts that threatened humans, and so on. Therefore, these descendants of the primal god race, even though they no longer had the powerful divine power to call the wind and summon the rain, they still occupied high positions within the human tribes. They became the high priests of the tribe and guided the development and advancement of the tribe. At the same time, they were also the symbol of the tribe's spiritual belief. Nowadays, unless a descendant of the ancient gods was lucky enough to find a spirit item that contained an innate aura, and the aura had to match the attribute of his or her bloodline, he or she would be able to absorb the innate energy, stimulate his or her bloodline, and form an innate divine soul, inheriting the tremendous divine power of his or her ancestors. But, innate treasures were extremely rare. Whenever an innate treasure was occasionally found in the world of cultivators, it would immediately trigger a great war. It was impossible for those descendants of the ancient gods to succeed. Princess Zhanglu was the only one who managed to successfully awaken the bloodline of the ancient gods in her after receiving the innate five elements energies that Wu Qi had unreservedly channeled into her. After a period of arduous cultivation, as well as a great amount of blood and soul crystals of heaven immortals to replenish her strength, and after spending dozens of days meditating in the heart-cleansing pool, she had finally awakened the miraculous power that she inherited from the ancient times. Once the innate divine soul was formed, she would possess the power of the ancient gods. Even though this power was relatively weak now, as Princess Zhanglu continued to cultivate, her overall strength would only grow stronger and stronger. The most wonderful thing was that, unlike the immortal cultivators who acted in defiance of the heavens, the ancient gods themselves were the manifestation of the laws of heaven and earth. Every move they made was in line with the heavenly Tao. As long as Princess Zhanglu did not kill the innocent and accumulate too much negative karma, no matter how much she improved her overall strength, she would never have to face the heavenly tribulation again. The green immortal destroying thunder tribulation that struck down just now was merely because Princess Zhanglu had transformed her mortal body into a divine body. After this thunder tribulation, as long as she did not massacre an entire city, destroy an entire country, or slaughter hundreds of millions of living beings, all kinds of thunder tribulations would not strike her again. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly cupped his fist and bowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua as he said, "Ancestral Master, please ask all the elders and fellow disciples present to swear in prime oath that they will never tell anyone about Zi Xian's origin. Otherwise, she will be in big trouble in the future." Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded and said, "Of course. Don't worry, Ancestral Master has his own plans. The little girl's identity will not be leaked out." A smile bloomed on Patriarch Yuan Hua's face like a blooming chrysanthemum. His heart was filled with joy and contentment. The mystery of the ancient gods lay not only in their enormous power, but also in the various magical abilities they possessed. The formation of energy veins, the production of earth energy, and all kinds of magical abilities were of great significance to the current immortal sections. With the formation of earth energy veins, the tiny energy veins that were originally lacking in innate power could gradually grow and grow stronger with the help of the divine energy. From a low-grade, inferior energy vein, it was possible that it could be transformed into an upper-grade energy vein in the end. When all the energy veins under Green Cliff Planet were transformed into the upper-grade energy veins, the planet would become a first-class blessed land, and there would be no need to worry about the lack of natural energy anymore. The production of earth energy was to turn an ordinary barren land into a fertile spirit soil. On such a spirit soil, all kinds of spirit herbs would grow better and stronger, and their medicinal strength would be stronger. On a barren land like this, a Ganoderma could only be used as a medicine after growing for 1,000 years. But on a spirit soil like this, which was strengthened by divine energy, a Ganoderma could be used as a medicine in 10 years, improve its grade in 100 years, and transform into a Ganoderma immortal that could roam freely in the universe. Divine energy was in line with the great Tao of heaven and earth, and therefore, it had endless magical effects, as it could affect the environment in the universe. On the other hand, immortal energy was just a product of extreme compression and condensation of natural energy, and could only affect heaven immortals. Cultivating immortal energy could only make a mortal immortal live forever, and possess a tremendous power that could destroy the world. On the other hand, cultivating immortal energy could make the surrounding world have good weather and abundant natural resources. As the divine energy grew stronger, all living beings within the area controlled by the divine energy would be influenced by it, becoming stronger and healthier, free from diseases and disasters. Even the number of people suitable for cultivation would be much higher than in other places. Now that Princess Zhanglu had formed her innate divine soul, the future of Yuanhua sect would certainly be immeasurable. Little Kair, who had golden feathers all over her body except for the feathers on the top of her head, landed happily on Princess Zhongli's shoulder and pecked Princess Zhongli's ear with her beak. Princess Zhonglu had dispelled the tribulation cloud and fused her divine soul into her body. Stepping on a pale, colorful cloud, she slowly descended before Wu Qi. Upon seeing her, Wu Qi was taken aback. Princess Xianglu looked the same as before, but there was a faint layer of colorful glow on her cheeks, which made her look even more beautiful. Her once crafty and quick-witted eyes had now become as clear as water, quiet and graceful. Only when she rolled her eyes occasionally did she regain her usual unruly and willful look. On top of that, the aura emanating from her body was like a warm spring breeze that caressed one's face, making one feel peaceful and peaceful instinctively. Intuitively, Wuqi discovered that Princess Xianglu seemed to have transformed from a crystal shard with thorns all over its body, and had turned into a jade ball that had been carved by an expert craftsman, glistening and shining brightly. Some fundamental changes had taken place, causing her to become completely different from before. Instinctively, Wuqi sensed an aura that belonged to wisdom from her clear eyes, which were as clear as water, quiet and graceful. It was an ancient wisdom, like the wisdom that came from the beginning of time. It was the wisdom that was hidden in the bloodline of those ancient gods, inherited from generation to generation. It was the wisdom that was the most basic and original wisdom of this universe, this heaven and earth, and this world. Compared to such wisdom, the heavenly Tao of heaven immortals and the marvelous theories of gold immortals were as shallow and pale as a kindergarten kid showing off the knowledge that 1 + 1 = 2. Gently, Princess Xianglu nodded at Wuqi with a smile, then said in a soft voice, "It seems that I've slept for a long time, and I finally woke up today." Wuqi's heart sank slightly. "So, Zixian, are you still Zixian?" he asked in a low voice. He kept nagging in his mind, "Please don't play any tricks like reincarnating in someone else's body, seizing the bloodline of the body to be reborn. If that is the case, even if the person standing in front of me is some ancient god, Wuqi will crush his bones and scatter his ashes, shattering his soul." Frowning slightly, Princess Xianglu smiled faintly and said, "Of course Zixian is still Zixian. It's just that." Tilting her head, Princess Xianglu chuckled and said, "It's just that I seem to have grown up all of a sudden. Looking back at the Zixian from a quarter of an hour ago, and the Zixian from over 10 years ago, I feel like I'm a child who hasn't grown up yet. But now, I seem to have learned a lot. It's just that there are many things that are too profound for me to understand." Gently holding Wuqi's shoulder, Princess Xianglu naturally rested her head on Wuqi's shoulder. Although she was doing such an intimate action in front of Patriarch Yuanhua, it was so natural that no one thought that Princess Zhongli's action was too ambiguous. Everyone felt that this was how Princess Xianglu should be doing. Every move she made, every word she said, every movement she made, every sound she made, they were all so natural, as if this was how it should be since the creation of the world. This was the magical thing about the ancient gods. Currently, Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was still weak, so there were not too many strange signs happening to her. When she truly possessed the power of an ancient god, every move she made would be able to change the color of the wind and clouds, and make the sun and moon lose their luster. Even the so-called law of words would be nothing more than a trivial skill. Wuqi put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, and both of them stood side by side in perfect harmony and natural harmony. It was like two great trees growing from the same root in a great mountain, and were supposed to stand together like this. When Wuqi put his arm around Princess Zhongli's waist, he felt a sense of comfort and warmth in his heart, as if all the flaws he had in this world were suddenly filled up. Patriarch Yuanhua looked at Wuqi and Princess Xianglu gladly, then said in a deep voice, "All disciples present, swear and prime oath that nothing that happened today will be leaked to anyone." Just tell them that I've successfully broken through to the first-tier immortal realm, and that my overall strength has been improved." All the surrounding elders and nascent divinity disciples cupped their fists and answered. Chapter 388. In just a blink of an eye, Wuqi and his companions had been cultivating in the heart-cleansing pool at the back of Green Cliff Mountain for 1 year and 5 months. Of course, what they told the public was that they had spent 17 months in the heart-cleansing pool because they had damaged the friendly relationship with Eminent Cloud sect. During the 17 months of hard cultivation, Princess Xianglu, Lord Xiansheng, and Catfish Flood Dragon had made great progress in their cultivation base. Princess Xianglu had formed her innate divine soul, but it was not the same as nascent soul and nascent divinity. no one could sense her actual overall strength. After Wu Qi taught her the false nascent soul technique from Scroll of Stealing, Princess Zhanglu had formed a dozen of them with great interest, basically including the natural forces of earth, water, fire, wind, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, thunder, cloud, mist, rainstorm, and many others. Naturally, her aura was at the level of peak stage nascent soul realm. Meanwhile, with the help of the heart-cleansing pool, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon had entered the state of enlightenment for a few times. Although it only lasted for 3 to 5 days each time, the benefits they gained were tremendous. Their nascent souls had become hazy, and they could communicate with the natural forces at any time to temper them and form their indestructible nascent divinity. However, in order to participate in the match, they had controlled their cultivation base, maintaining it at the realm of nascent soul. As for Wu Qi, he had not done anything for the past 1 year, but kept tempering his fleshly body and pushing his dragon transformation script to another level. The dragon transformation script was a body tempering technique specially created by dragons for their descendants. The highest level was the 9 transformations of Divine Dragon, followed by the 18 transformations of Heavenly Dragon, and the 36 transformations of True Dragon, which corresponded to the tiers of Primordial Immortals, Gold Immortals, and Heaven Immortals. However, there was an even lower level technique in the Dragon Transformation script, which was the 3 transformations of Flood Dragon below the True Dragon transformation. The 3 transformations of Flood Dragon was a technique that could allow those low-grade flood dragons, such as serpents and fishes, to improve the purity of their bloodline and strengthen their bodies, so that they could transcend the heavenly tribulation and transcend into True Dragon. The first transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the Hotian, Xiantian, and Jin Dan realms. The second transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the nascent soul realm. The third transformation of the Flood Dragon corresponded to the cultivators of the nascent soul realm, all the way until they transcended the tribulation and ascended. After over a year of laborious cultivation, he had completed all the cultivation techniques of the third transformation of Flood Dragon for his fleshly body. Dragons were not considered real dragons. They were often referred to as demonic dragons by pure-blooded dragons. They were even referred to as demonic beasts by proud dragons. Therefore, the body cultivated by the WIRM transformation was covered in knots of muscles, revealing its sharpness. It was like a treasured sword that had just been refined, and it was filled with an oppressive might. Each and every one of his movements was accompanied by a tremendous force, and a gentle palm strike could topple a mountain. The fleshly body of the dragons was one of the strongest fleshly bodies in the domain. After cultivating the third transformation of the Flood Dragon, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body was several times stronger than those nascent divinity cultivators who specialized in body tempering. His muscles were truly as tough as iron. If ordinary qi refining cultivators were careless and let him get close to them, he could easily break their bones and tear their tendons with just a casual strike. If they did not have a good spirit item to protect themselves, it was not impossible for them to die on the spot. A deep breathing sound that sounded like the roar of thunder rang out. Suddenly, a piece of ground near the heart-cleansing pool protruded. With his upper body naked, Wu Qi pushed away the thick rock layer with brute force and drilled out from the ground. Princess Zhanglu was already standing at the side. In front of her floated a few feet wide clump of clear water, and in her hand was a snow-white towel. When Wu Qi took a deep breath and retracted his cultivation technique, Princess Zhanglu had already gently dipped the towel in the clear water and wiped away the dirt and dust on Wu Qi's body. While wiping Wu Qi's body, Princess Zhanglu smiled and said with a slightly sarcastic tone, "Look at you now, you look so scary." Wu Qi retracted his cultivation technique and helplessly looked at his body, which had become so angular and bulging with muscles. He smiled helplessly and said, "When I transcend the heavenly tribulation and start cultivating the true dragon transformation, I won't look like this anymore." The shape of a true dragon is like the wind, rain, mist, and lightning. It can devour the heaven and earth, and can hide in a mustard seed. It has endless divine abilities and magical powers, and will never look like this. She poked Wu Qi's chest muscles with her finger, twitching her lips. Then, she waved her hand and forcefully threw the ball of water onto Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi was drenched by the water, but within a blink of an eye, the water kept spinning and leaving Wu Qi's body, bringing away all the dust on his body. Wu Qi stretched his body and let out a series of creaking noises from all the joints in his body. He took out a long robe and put it on, then gave a loud and sonorous whistle. On top of a parasol tree, little Kair, who was standing on the treetop in a daze, suddenly fell down from the treetop, landing on the ground with all four limbs spread out. After a long while, little Kair finally realized that Wu Qi was whistling. She lazily flapped her wings and flew up into the sky, weakly holding her fat belly and landing on top of Wu Qi's head. After that, she fiercely scratched Wu Qi's hair. Wu Qi sighed helplessly as he stroked little Kair's plump body. Perhaps, this was the fattest descendant of a phoenix in the history. She did not look like a phoenix at all, instead, she looked more like a piglet. Princess Xianglu had been spoiling her way too much. During the past 1 year, she had been feeding her a huge amount of fire element energy stones, all kinds of energy spring water, and countless fresh fruits. Little Kair, who could never digest so much energy and food, had turned into this fat and sluggish appearance. Well, people will mistake you for a fat hen, and will never think that you actually have the phoenix bloodline. Wu Qi shook his head and sighed at Princess Xianglu, who had a big smile on her face, and said, "This is good, no one will guard against her." Really, no one will guard against her. Little Sparrow chirped lazily for a few times, then opened its beak and spat out a large amount of grape seeds, which landed on a towering tree far away. After that, it let out an unsightly burp. If those noble, sacred, pure-blooded phoenixes saw little Kair right now, they would most likely immediately kill her, and conveniently kill Wu Qi and the others to silence them. That would be a great disgrace to the Phoenix clan. After waking up Lord Xiansheng, who was immersed in the state of enlightenment with an incantation, the four of them gathered together and discussed for a while. Suddenly, a cloud flew over from afar, on which stood a little Taoist boy. "Uncle Masters, Ancestral Grandpa has decreed that you can leave the heart-cleansing pool now to prepare for the match in a month's time. Uncle Masters, please leave the back of the mountain as soon as possible and do not stay any longer." While shouting, the little Taoist boy fished out a spirit talisman and shook it casually. The talisman turned into ashes, and a bright light shot out from it. Instantly, the heart-cleansing pool was filled with smoke and clouds, while the starlight reflected from the water changed abruptly. Now, the heart-cleansing pool no longer had the miraculous effect of helping one gain enlightenment, and only had the effect of emitting cold air and raging flame at noon to help one cleanse one's heart and face the wall. Cupping his fist at the little Taoist boy, Wu Qi fished out a storage bag and threw it casually. The bag flew over 1 mile away amidst a breeze and fell into the little Taoist boy's hand. The little Taoist boy was taken aback. He sent his divine will into the bag, and was immediately taken aback by the 100 upper-grade energy stones inside. Without hesitation, he cupped his fist and thanked Wu Qi. "Thank you for the generous gift, Uncle Master. I'll take my leave now." The little Taoist boy left happily, while Wu Qi and the others stepped onto the cloud and flew leisurely towards Greenwood Peak. Right after they left the back of Green Cliff Mountain, Catfish Flood Dragon cried out, "Aren't you hungry? We haven't eaten a single grain of rice for over a year, and I'm very hungry." Catfish Flood Dragon's eyes darted quickly. She raised her right hand and gestured while saying, "Over the past year, I've been traveling with my nascent soul. 5,000 miles east of Greenwood Peak, there is a very large valley. There are many demon beasts raised there, and all of them are fat and delicious." Lord Xiansheng gave Catfish Flood Dragon a glare, then rubbed his belly and said with a dry smile, "I've been strolling around that place for a few times these days. Yes, they are fat and delicious, but it is a place where Yuanhua sect raises demon beasts as demon pets or mounts for their disciples. Our tolerance is not small." Wu Qi held Princess Zhongli's hand and did not pay any attention to them. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon's true forms were enormous, and they could easily devour over 100 demon beasts in one meal. As for the demon pets and mounts raised by Yuanhua sect, they were too embarrassed to eat them. Princess Zhanglu chuckled and said, "Well, we'll just find a mortal city and buy a few thousand livestock. Those Longbow people in Wuqi's tribe are also fond of blood and flesh. Haven't they been complaining about wanting to eat meat and drink wine every day lately?" Wuqi nodded and flicked his finger, causing the spirit breeding ring to emit a large sheet of white light. While the four of them were chatting and laughing along the way, Princess Zhongli's ears suddenly twitched, and she turned to look down with a cold face. Following Princess Zhongli's gaze, Wuqi looked down as well. What he saw made him feel a surge of anger rushing up to his head. Before Wuqi could react, Princess Zhongli's body flickered and reappeared on top of a small hill several tens of miles away. She raised her little hand and gave a series of slaps. On top of the hill, two young Taoists clad in green Taoist robes rolled and fell to the ground, their teeth spraying out like popcorn and their faces smeared with blood. While the two young Taoists were still rolling on the ground, Princess Zhonglu rushed over and stomped hard on their heads. Dozens of clanging noises rang out in a row, and the heads of the two young Taoists sank about a foot deep into the fertile soil, smearing their faces with mud. In the herb field off to the side, the two young girls whom Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xianxing saved from Yun Wuqi of Luo Ling sect over a year ago were kneeling pitifully on the ground. Their coarse Taoist robes were torn and ragged, exposing large patches of fair and tender skin, and a few glaring whip marks were left on their skin. Princess Zhonglu stomped hard on the heads of the two young Taoists and snapped furiously, "I've ordered my men to take good care of them, but how dare you torture them? Damn bastards! Who gave you the courage to do that?" Upon seeing Princess Zhonglu, the two young girls burst into tears at the same time. They rose to their feet, grabbed Princess Zhongli's sleeves tightly, and refused to let go. Wuqi flew down with a dark face, looking coldly at the two unconscious young Taoists who were stomped by Princess Zhonglu. He snorted coldly and said, "What a bunch of fools. What are you doing? Are you bullying a new disciple?" Right at that moment, a furious roar was heard coming from a distance, "How dare you bully my disciple? This immortal master is the manager of this thousandly herb mountain. You dare to beat up this immortal master's disciple in front of this immortal master?" Amidst the furious roar, a beam of green light shot over. It was a white-faced Taoist with a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm, riding on a sword and charging over angrily. "Gone too far." Wuqi rolled his eyes and snapped, "Lao Tzu, I'll let you know what it means to go too far. Catfish Flood Dragon, eat them." Saliva was dripping down from the corner of Catfish Flood Dragon's mouth as she flew over while roaring happily, grabbing one of the Taoists and swallowing him whole. Before she could swallow the second Taoist, Lord Xianxing had arrived on a cloud, his head transforming into the shape of a flood dragon as he swallowed the other young Taoist. The white-faced Taoist, who was riding on a sword and charging over, roared furiously. With a shake of his hand, dozens of thumb-sized thunderbolt beads shrouded in purple mist fell down from above, enveloping Wuqi and his company. Chapter 389. Each of the thunderbolts was about the size of a thumb. They were condensed by Yuanhua sect's heaven immortals using a mystic technique found in the Unity Scripture of Inaction, which allowed them to gather the remaining energy of thunderbolts amidst the raging storm. The thunderbolts produced naturally by the heaven and earth were especially fierce and overbearing at the very moment when they were about to vanish. The power of one thunderbolt was more than enough to flatten a small hill, and if a nascent soul cultivator was careless, his fleshly body would be severely wounded. Grinning coldly, Wuqi casually extended his hand and grabbed the air. Several dozens of thunderbolts were wrapped up by the powerful whirlpool unleashed by the hand of Web, then shot down like birds flying into the forest, and were caught in his palm. Then, he clasped his palms together and exerted a tremendous force to firmly suppress the thunderbolts. Although these thunderbolts were powerful enough to severely wound a nascent soul cultivator, they could not explode, and were forcibly suppressed and subdued by Wuqi with the strength of his fleshly body. The white-faced Taoist was taken aback. The Unity Thunder he unleashed could be ranked in the top 5 among all the thunder techniques of various immortal sects in Puyo Heavenly Realm, and its power was extremely astonishing. If not for the fact that he was the chief supervisor of this herb mountain, which measured 1,000 miles in circumference, and had secretly collected some spirit herbs to exchange with his fellow sect members, with his cultivation base and status, he would not have been able to obtain such a large number of thunderbolts. Today, it was Catfish Flood Dragon and Lord Xiansheng who had devoured his beloved disciples one after another. That had made him extremely angry, and that was why he had thrown out several dozens of thunderbolts at the same time regardless of the consequences. But, never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Wu Qi could forcibly subdue and suppress all these thunderbolts with just his bare palms. Oh heaven, this was something that not even a nascent divinity cultivator could do. In Yuanhua sect, only those heaven immortal elders could subdue the explosive thunderbolts with mighty divine abilities using immortal energy. Yet, this young man in front of him could actually do it. The white-faced Daoist howled miserably. He no longer dared to fight with Wu Qi and his companions. With a spin of his sword, he spun and fled. However, right after he turned around, Princess Zhang pointed her finger at him angrily and cried out sternly, "Disperse." Following Princess Zhang Li's shout, the natural powers surrounding the white-faced priest suddenly dispersed. Along with a loud clang, his sword light dimmed and turned into a 3 feet long sword, falling on the ground. With a cold snort, Princess Zhang waved her hand, rolled up her sleeves, and shouted, "Wind!" Along with a shrill roar, a fierce gust of wind rose from the ground, as if the gate of hell had truly been opened. From the netherworld, a black, dragon-like hurricane roared out and shredded all herbs on this mountaintop. The white-faced priest didn't even have the power to fight back. Deep in the eye of the hurricane, he howled in pain as he was rolled up into the air by the hurricane. His body spun swiftly in the hurricane like a windmill. Spinning at a high speed, the white-faced priest was like a piece of cloth in a flail machine. His blood slowly crushed his blood vessels and muscles, causing large amounts of blood to spurt out of his body. Squatting on Princess Zhang Li's shoulder, little Kair, who was as fat as a piglet, flapped her wings with great difficulty, staring fiercely at the white-faced Daoist, who was spinning rapidly in the air about 1 mile above the ground. She opened her mouth and let out a clear chirp. The surrounding area suddenly became hot, and along with a thunderous boom, the black hurricane around the white-faced priest suddenly turned into a raging red flame. The black wind condensed into a raging flame. The huge ball of wind and fire exploded, and the white-faced Taoist fell from the sky with a miserable howl. All the bones and flesh in his body were blown into pieces, and only the upper half of his body was barely intact. With such a serious injury, without top-grade magic medicines, his body would be destroyed for 3 to 5 years. Princess Zhang gave the white-faced priest a sideways glance, then gently stroked the heads of the 2 girls standing next to her and said softly, "Peppermint, Angelica, come with me. Let's see who dares to bully you again." Even as she spoke, Princess Zhang Li's anger didn't dissipate. With a hint of anger, she asked, "I asked you to stay in Greenwood Peak, so why did you come here and get whipped?" Peppermint and Angelica were the 2 girls saved by Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon in Green Cliff Immortal Market. Their parents were ordinary herb gatherers in the mortal world, who usually went deep into the mountains and forests to collect herbs. They would sell ordinary herbs to the herb shops in the mortal world, and if they found some rare spirit herbs, they would send them to Green Cliff Immortal Market in exchange for 1 or 2 energy stones. Relying on this method, their parents managed to save some money, which they used to exchange for a basic energy refinement technique for the sisters. With the help of the Qi refinement technique, the 2 sisters managed to cultivate a meager amount of inner force. On the other hand, as their parents had been traveling through the mountains and forests all year round, they had inhaled a large amount of poisonous miasma, causing their bodies to deteriorate day by day. In the end, the sisters could only go deep into the mountains to collect herbs, using them to support their family and accumulate energy stones for their cultivation. If not for Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon's help in Luoling Pavilion, the sisters would have been taken away and used as cultivation vessels. However, Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu had taken a fancy to their excellent cultivation aptitude. Therefore, they brought them back to Greenwood Peak and asked them to stay in Yuanhua sect, preparing to let them join the ranks of Yuanhua sect's outer sect disciples. However, they did not expect that after 1 year and 5 months of facing the wall, in heart-cleansing pool, when they came out, they saw them being brutally beaten in Herb Mountain. How could they not be filled with anger? As the elder sister, Bo He was a little braver. Clutching tightly onto Princess Zhang Li's sleeve, she stammered and told them what had happened during the past 1 year. With Immortal Green Staff's help, the sisters had successfully passed the aptitude test and joined Yuanhua sect, temporarily being listed as outer sect disciples. However, outer sect disciples did not have the right to stay in Greenwood Peak, as they were under the unified management and distribution of the sect. Every disciple of Yuanhua sect had to go through an uncapped probation period of at least 3 years, during which they would have to serve Yuanhua sect on their own. They were either chopping firewood, planting trees, cultivating herbs, or building new buildings and houses. In short, all the menial work in Yuanhua sect was done by these outer sect disciples who had just joined the sect. Those who performed well, were loyal and diligent, would be taught the most basic energy refinement technique after 3 to 5 years. With that, they would be freed from all the menial work and be able to focus on their cultivation. If they did not perform well, or did not please their masters, they would have to work hard until they died. After all, there were countless mortals on Green Cliff Planet, and there were countless mortals who were suitable for cultivation. Therefore, it was not easy to find a 3-legged frog. Therefore, as long as Yuanhua sect spread the word that they were short of outer sect disciples, countless people would cry and scream, trying to squeeze into the sect. Since Immortal Green Staff was taking care of Peppermint and Angelica, they were assigned to Herb Mountain, which was the most relaxing place among the outer sect disciples. Every day, they would have to loosen the soil and water the herbs that were assigned to them. Their days went by very easily. On top of that, Herb Mountain was filled with abundant natural energies. When they were free, they could cultivate on their own. In just a few months, their cultivation base had increased by a few years. However, ever since Immortal Green Staff brought all the disciples of Greenwood Peak into a secluded cultivation, preparing for the match with Huiling sect, a nightmare suddenly befell the sisters. Taoist White Sparrow became the elder of Spirit Herb's Palace, who was in charge of all the affairs in Yuanhua sect's Herb Mountain. Suddenly, the workload of the sisters increased by 30 times. Despite their young age, they were asked to take care of all the spirit herbs in the herb fields on the 5 great mountains. Once they failed to complete their daily tasks, they would be punished by having their food and water cut, whipped, and scolded rudely by some supervisors who were also outer sect disciples. Fortunately, the sisters were used to suffering hardships since they were young, or they would have been tortured to death by these people in just a few days. While sobbing, Bo He told Princess Xianglu everything that had happened. Angelica just kept grabbing Princess Zhang Li's sleeve, staring nervously at Princess Xianglu with her pale little face. Both sisters' bodies were trembling slightly. Obviously, they were terrified. Lord Xianqing burped, then walked slowly before the pale-faced Taoist, who was at his last gasp. Laughing strangely, he said, "Actually, when I was in Longyuan River, I would occasionally catch a handful of cultivators and have them as a sumptuous meal. After all, I have the body of a demon dragon, and it is perfectly justified for me to eat humans." Catfish Flood Dragon, who had just been swallowed by the young Taoist, strode over to the pale-faced Taoist. She reached out her hands to pinch and stroke the body of the pale-faced Taoist, and suddenly, saliva began to gush out of her mouth. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then said smilingly, "The higher the cultivation base, the tastier they are. Humans are just like spirit herbs in the woods. The older they are, the better their taste will be, and the richer their flavor will be." The 2 evil dragons stared at the pale-faced Taoist from both sides, sizing him up from head to toe. It frightened him so much that his face turned blue, and he cried out hysterically, "Help! Help! This has nothing to do with me. It was Uncle Master Huan Yi who asked me to do this. You can't kill me, you can't eat me." I'm the disciple of immortal Taiyu from Tsangmu Peak. You can't kill me. You can't kill me. Tsangmu Peak was the third peak in Yuanhua sect after Green Cliff Mountain. Immortal Taiyu was the elder of Yuanhua sect's inner sect, in charge of all the affairs in the sect. He was the third person after Daoist Min and Daoist Qi. In fact, Immortal Taiyu's cultivation base was slightly stronger than Daoist Min and Daoist Qi. If not for the fact that he was not Patriarch Yuanhua's direct disciple, and only merged his entire clan into Yuanhua sect after Yuanhua sect was established, after wiping out all the powers on Green Cliff Planet, his status would be even higher than Daoist Min and Daoist Qi. Obviously, all the affairs in Spirit Herb's palace were managed by Immortal Taiyu, and naturally, the chief supervisor of the 1,000 miles wide Herb Mountain was his disciple. Usually, Immortal Taiyu formed his own branch in Yuanhua sect, and he was supported by a few elders of Heaven Immortal Realm. Vaguely, he was the third strongest power in Yuanhua sect, after Daoist Min and Daoist Qi. If Wu Qi were to hurt his disciple, it might arouse Immortal Taiyu's dissatisfaction toward Daoist Qi's branch. Once that happened, the implications would be too great. The white-faced Daoist let out a few cries, then looked at Wu Qi with a pitiful expression and said, "Those two damned good-for-nothings are just outer sect stewards. So what if they are dead? As for me, I've already acknowledged Patriarch Taiyu's 9th disciple as my master, and I'm really the successor of Tsangmu Peak. Senior brothers, please spare me." Wu Qi looked at the white-faced Daoist and could not help but shake his head. Immortal Taiyu's grand disciple. If that was the case, this man's seniority was equal to that of Patriarch Jiang Yun, and he was the uncle master of Wu Qi and his companions. But, he was a little too spineless. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi was about to deal with this white-faced Daoist when a red light flashed across the sky. Soundlessly, a handsome Daoist with a ruddy complexion and white hair appeared before everyone. A faintly discernible immortal pressure forced Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon to retreat. The Daoist frowned and asked in a cold voice, "What happened?" Wu Qi gave the Daoist a look. He had a youthful face, white hair, and a beardless face. Who else could he be but Immortal Taiyu? Trouble was knocking on his door. Wu Qi sighed inwardly. Chapter 390. However, it was a pity that the person he bumped into was not one of those moral cultivators who followed the rules, but Wu Qi. Bam! Wu Qi and Immortal Taiyu collided head-on with each other, not even a single bit of energy leaked out from their clash. Neither of them used any divine abilities or magical powers, and it was just a clash of pure physical strength. Wu Qi's body trembled, and his Daoist robe suddenly turned into a puff of dust that drifted away in the air. On the other side, Immortal Taiyu's pale face turned as red as blood. His body swayed, and he took 1, 2, 3 steps back uncontrollably. Looking at Peppermint's badly mutilated back in horror, Immortal Taiyu glared fiercely at the white-faced Daoist, then swung his hand and gave him a slap on the face. Slap! A powerful force exploded inside the white-faced Daoist's body, shattering all his bones and flesh and splattering blood in all directions. The white-faced Daoist was now in the same state as the white-faced Daoist, and his injuries were even more severe, making him look even more miserable. He had done the right thing by displaying his overall strength appropriately. From today onwards, Wu Qi was the strongest man in Yuanhua sect below the Heaven Immortals. After absorbing the blood crystals of so many Heaven Immortals, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body could no longer be measured with common sense. Princess Zhang Li's words rendered Immortal Taiyu speechless. After a full 15 minutes, Immortal Taiyu smiled bitterly and said with an unsightly expression, "You juniors are really, aren't you afraid that I'll use my strength to suppress you? Wu Qi, Zi Xian, Xian Sheng, see you, even if you join hands, you won't be able to withstand a single strike from me. If I kill you with the crime of deceiving your master and betraying your sect." Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Immortal Taiyu's brows twitched. Suddenly, he roared with laughter and said, "Excellent! Excellent! I can't believe I've been taught a lesson by you today. Amidst his wild laughter, he suddenly raised his right palm and thrust it forcefully towards Wu Qi. There were no astral winds or lightning. Immortal Tai Yu did not use any divine abilities or magic powers. He simply relied on his fleshly body to send a palm strike towards Wu Qi. From today onwards, Wu Qi, Zi Xian, Xian Sheng, and Si Yu, the disciples of Greenwood Peak, will be Yuanhua sect's 5th generation first-seat disciples, and will have the right to supervise their fellow disciples. All the disciples of Yuanhua sect are not allowed to disobey. Dozens of streams of divine sense retreated gracefully like swimming fishes. Only one, which belonged to Patriarch Yuanhua, suddenly spread out in all directions. After that, all the disciples of Yuanhua sect heard his voice at the same time. Moreover, Wu Qi cultivated a Xiantian cultivation technique, and the Jin Yuan in his body was composed of Xiantian qi. The innate qi could nourish the foundation and stabilize the source, the innate earth qi could strengthen the fleshly body, the innate wood qi could strengthen the life force, the innate water qi could make the fleshly body extremely flexible, the innate fire qi could increase the explosive force of the fleshly body, and the innate metal qi could increase the lethality of the fleshly body. As Wu Qi possessed the innate aura of 5 elements, although he still had the fleshly body of a cultivator, it was more than enough to fight against the immortal body of a heaven immortal. On Immortal Tai Yu's palm, which was as fair as jade, was a crimson fist mark that had sunk half an inch deep into his palm, nearly piercing through it. Without showing any sign of weakness, Wu Qi took a step forward and said with a stern voice, "This is Yuanhua sect's headquarters. I don't think Ancestral Uncle Master has the ability to cover the sky with one hand, right? Moreover, although Ancestral Uncle Master is a 30th tier heaven immortal, he is severely wounded, and currently only has the overall strength of a 35th tier heaven immortal. If I may be so bold, a heaven immortal with such a cultivation base is nothing in my eyes." With a flick of his sleeve, a cloud rushed out from under Immortal Tai Yu's feet. Stepping on the cloud, he flew straight towards Daoist Qi's humble peak. Upon seeing that his grand disciple was severely wounded, Immortal Tai Yu simply separated a thread of his prime energy essence and injected it into his body, helping him to recover. A thread of prime energy essence of a 30th tier heaven immortal was almost equal to all the life force of this pale-faced immortal. Naturally, his injuries were quickly healed, and very soon, he returned to his peak condition. In fact, his condition was much better than before he was wounded. After forcing Immortal Tai Yu back with a punch, Wu Qi patted the black dragon's spirit ring. The black dragon's soul flew out abruptly, opened its mouth and gave a furious roar at Immortal Tai Yu. Wu Qi said coolly, "I'm lucky. There is a heavenly dragon soul in this ring, and what I'm cultivating is the dragon transformation script." Wu Qi breathed out a long breath. Loud creaking noises came from all the joints in his body, and only then did he retract the dragon transformation script. Cracking noises could be heard coming from the joints of Wu Qi's right arm. Slowly, he stretched out his swollen and sore palm and pointed a finger at the pale-faced Daoist. The Daoist's body, which was badly mutilated by the explosion of wind and fire, healed quickly, and all the broken bones, flesh, and meridians were quickly regenerated. Immortal Tai Yu's cultivation technique focused on the balance of yin and yang, nurturing a thread of life force in one's body. Although it was not suitable for fighting and killing, it was a top-notch technique when used to nurse one's fleshly body, heal illnesses, and cure people. Immortal Tai Yu waved his right hand, shattering the pale-faced Daoist's nascent soul on the ground. Then, he grabbed the pale-faced Daoist and threw him several thousand miles away, out of Yuanhua sect's mountain gate. After that, Immortal Tai Yu cried out sternly, "Yuan Yu, you have failed to teach your disciple properly, allowing him to bully new disciples in the sect. You will be punished by facing the wall in the heart-cleansing pool behind the mountain for 3 years." Wu Qi smiled faintly and did not offer any explanation. He had cultivated the dragon transformation script, and had completed the 3 transformations of Flood Dragon. As a result, his fleshly body was a few times stronger than peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators who specialized in body cultivation, allowing him to fight head-on against a 36th-tier heaven immortal who specialized in body cultivation. What immortal Taiyu focused on was the tempering of the immortal soul, and the cultivation of Tao, magic, and divine abilities. Although his immortal body was very strong, how could it be compared to the current Wu Qi? Wu Qi pulled Bo He's little hand and asked her to take 2 steps forward. Then, he spun her around, exposing her back that was riddled with scars to immortal Taiyu. Grinning coldly, he said, "Grand Uncle Master, please take a look. If we are talking about disciples from the same sect killing each other, who was the one who struck first?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "What's so strange about that? Bo He and Angelica have an excellent latent talent. Compared to them, the 2 repulsive disciples who were devoured are worse than pigs and dogs. 2 excellent disciples were whipped for no reason, and naturally, those 2 rascals should pay with their lives. Do jade artifacts and rubble really have the same value?" Taking in a deep breath, immortal Taiyu said in shock, "The dragon's body cultivation technique? Wu Qi, you are actually a dual cultivator of life and death. Moreover, the strength of your fleshly body is actually comparable to the immortal body that this poor Taoist painstakingly cultivated for millions of years. Even though this poor Taoist only cultivates the primordial spirit and doesn't focus on cultivating the fleshly body, after so many years of tempering with immortal energy, this poor Taoist's fleshly body is strong enough to carry mountains and overturn seas. Your fleshly body is actually comparable to a heavenly immortal." Immortal Taiyu was stunned for a long time. Then, he pointed at the white-faced Taoist and said coldly, "That." After a slight pause, immortal Taiyu said coldly, "Senior brother Tai, White Sparrow is not suitable to be the spiritual medicine hall master. Taiyu cannot discipline him. Please find someone else." The moment the white-faced Taoist's injuries were healed, he immediately jumped up and hugged immortal Taiyu's thigh. "Grand Master, please seek justice for this disciple. They swallowed my 2 disciples alive. They ate them. They swallowed them in one gulp. They even injured me and are planning to eat me as well." Raising her head arrogantly, Princess Zhanglu said coldly, "Zi Xian and Wu Qi only seek fairness in their actions. If Grand Ancestral Uncle can be fair, Zi Xian and Wu Qi will do as you say. If you can't, then don't blame us for not giving Grand Ancestral Uncle any face." Sighing lightly, immortal Taiyu nodded and said, "It is Taiyu's fault for not teaching them properly, allowing them to do such a shameful thing. However, since they were innocent and punished their fellow disciples, they will naturally be punished according to the rules of the sect. You guys were too ruthless. 2 of your disciples were actually swallowed alive. You guys are too daring." First, he injured his own disciples to show that he was fair and decisive. Then, he punished Wu Qi for being too ruthless. Immortal Taiyu's methods were indeed extraordinary. A wild roar rang out. Suddenly, golden dragon scale-shaped veins flashed across his skin, and muffled noises rang out from all his joints like thunderclaps. His body grew taller by over a foot, and his muscles expanded by about 2 times. He circulated the 3rd transformation of the Flood Dragon transformation art. Godly power rumbled within his body like thunder. With a deep roar, he punched towards immortal Taiyu's palm. Taiyu nodded subconsciously. Just as he was about to say something, Wu Qi interrupted, "Disciple is bold enough to say that all the outstanding disciples of your clan will die prematurely. Even if they don't die prematurely, they won't be able to cultivate to great heights in the future. Even if they manage to cultivate a few nascent souls, they will still be killed by others. Sooner or later, they will die a horrible death." Wu Qi laughed coldly. He paused for a moment, then turned to immortal Taiyu, who had an unsightly expression on his face, and said, "Disciple, are you happy with what disciple has said?" Immortal Taiyu narrowed his blurry eyes, which were not big to begin with. His youthful face and white hair now had a hint of haziness in them. He snorted coldly. However, his cold snort, together with his blurry eyes, did not have any deterrence. He gave Wu Qi a glance, then turned to look at Princess Zhanglu, who stood behind Wu Qi, and said coldly, "Yuanhua sect forbids the killing of fellow disciples. This is the most serious offense according to the sect rules. After a moment of silence, Immortal Taiyu shook his head with a wry smile on his face. He pointed at the timid Peppermint and Angelica and said, although both of them have excellent latent talents, it does not mean they will be able to cultivate to great heights in the future. On the contrary. Jadeware and rubble, are they worth the same price? Once again, Wuqi rudely interrupted Immortal Taiyu. He took a step forward, casually pulled out a folding fan from Black Dragon's spirit ring, opened it, and waved it a few times. Grand Uncle Master Taiyu, are there any outstanding disciples in your clan? He asked coldly. Grinning coldly, Wuqi interrupted Immortal Taiyu and said, they are merely claypots. How could they be compared with pearls and precious gems? It was a declaration of his stance. Immortal Taiyu did not show any respect to Daoist Min. He had sided with Daoist Qi, and even struck the iron while it was hot by paying a visit to Dateo Peak. It was a blatant show of goodwill and declaration of his stance. By punishing his own disciple and paying a visit to Daoist Qi, it proved that Immortal Taiyu had chosen to be close to Daoist Qi's clan, and had given up on Daoist Min's clan. Immortal Taiyu opened his narrowed eyes, and the blurry look in them vanished. Slowly, he straightened his back, and like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, he shone with a cold gleam that made one shudder. Wuqi, oh Wuqi, you have gone too far with your words. There is no enmity between you and Taiyu, so why must you curse his juniors like this? Immortal Taiyu had a blurry look in his eyes. It meant that he had just woken up from a deep sleep, and his eyes were still covered with the gunk, and he had no idea who he was. Feebly, he gave Wuqi a look, then asked again with a cold voice, what happened? Princess Zhanglu took a step forward, pulling Peppermint and Angelica along with her, and said with a sneer, if that is the case, why must Grand Uncle Master curse Peppermint and Angelica, two innocent young girls? Could it be that just because Grand Uncle Master's juniors are human beings, Peppermint and Angelica should die? Chapter 391. Greenwood Peak towered into the clouds, shaped like a towering tree. The mountain was densely covered with a type of broad-leaved trees, each of which stood 1,000 feet tall and were extremely thick. When a strong wind blew past, it seemed as if the mountain was shaking along with the wind, producing loud noises of waves. That was why it was named Greenwood Peak. There were 4 huge underground energy veins, which converged at the foot of Greenwood Peak according to the 4 cardinal directions. A small energy-condensing immortal ascension ball was connected to the 4 energy veins, transforming 70% of the energy in them into immortal energy that contained a slight element of green wood. All the immortal energies were gathered at the top of the peak, where immortal green staff usually cultivated in seclusion, while the rest of the energies were drifting in the surroundings, nourishing Greenwood Peak with rich earth energy and making all sorts of exotic flowers and grasses look extraordinarily beautiful. Apart from Patriarch Jiang Yun, there were tens of other inner sect disciples serving immortal green staff. However, apart from Daoist Li who had attained the 36th tier heaven immortal realm, none of the other inner sect disciples had made any significant progress. On the contrary, Patriarch Jiang Yun, an outer sect disciple who was forced to leave Yuanhua sect 100,000 years ago, had attained the righteous fruit of heaven immortal. As a result, apart from the abode on the peak where immortal green staff usually stayed and cultivated, there were 2 other abodes on the left and right side of Greenwood Peak. One belonged to Daoist Li, and the other newly built abode belonged to Patriarch Jiang Yun. In Patriarch Jiang Yun's abode, Peppermint and Angelica were lying on a bamboo bed. With a cold face, Princess Zhanglu was smearing a medicinal ointment on their backs, which were covered in layers of scars, both new and old. The medicinal ointment was personally prepared by Wuqi. But, just like the medicinal ointment he used to treat Yen Bugue, Wuqi only pursued a strong and outstanding medicinal effect, and never paid attention to the method of administering medicine. Therefore, although the medicinal ointment was very strong, it was also very irritating. Every time the medicinal ointment touched the bloody wounds, Peppermint and Angelica felt as if they were being heavily slashed by someone. Even though the medicinal ointment concocted by Wuqi was a life-saving spirit medicine, it was no different from being tortured. But, Peppermint and Angelica, who had a petite body and a childish face, did not even let out a snort. Their tiny bodies were trembling violently, but their hands were holding tightly onto Princess Zhongli's skirt. Wu Qi stood by the bamboo bed and frowned as he looked at the two girls who were in so much pain that their foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. After a long time, he said, "Zi Xian, these two girls are not bad. You should accept them as your disciples. Their aptitudes are extremely good. I've checked them, and they all have top-grade water spirit veins." As for the supreme-grade water element root, Wu Qi happened to have the Dark-Een water scripture he obtained from Lady Dark Gold Water. It was a supreme scripture that could allow him to cultivate all the way to the first tier of Gold Immortal Realm safely. On top of that, he also had the Dark-Een energy vase, which could absorb water element energies and turn them into various acquired water to aid his cultivation. With the aptitudes of Peppermint and Angelica, they were the perfect candidates to inherit the cultivation technique Wu Qi obtained. Naturally, Princess Zhonglu would do whatever Wu Qi said. She nodded her head and said in a cold voice, "Peppermint, Angelica, from now on, you're my disciples. Don't ever be bullied by anyone again. If anyone dares to bully you, just go ahead and kill them. Those who provoke my disciples will have their entire family wiped out." Wu Qi cleared his throat and interrupted Princess Zhongli's words. They were not in Great Yan Dynasty, and it was not so easy to have someone's entire family wiped out. Princess Zhongli's face blushed slightly. She gave Wu Qi a fierce glare, and only then did she continue to apply the ointment on the backs of the two girls. Upon hearing Princess Zhongli's words, the two sisters, who had been enduring the pain from the ointment and refusing to make a sound, suddenly burst into tears. They hugged Princess Zhongli's waist tightly with both hands and kept calling out, "Master." Wu Qi felt sad at the sight and kept frowning. Standing next to him, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon shook their heads. They did not have the rich emotions of human beings. Standing next to them, Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun snorted angrily at the same time. Immortal Green Staff clenched his jaws and said, "I can't believe someone dares to hurt the disciples that Lao Tzu has asked to be sent to Palace of Spirit Herbs. We'll settle this score with White Sparrow later. Damn it, don't let Lao Tzu find out who sent White Sparrow to Palace of Spirit Herbs. Sooner or later, Lao Tzu will break White Sparrow's legs." With a gloomy face, Patriarch Jiang Yun snorted coldly and said, "Master, let me handle this." How could they hurt two obedient little girls? How shameless, despicable, and obscene. Do they still deserve to be Yuan Hua sect's disciples? Daoist Li was in the room as well. He stood 5 feet tall, had a lean face, and was in high spirits. Clad in a long brown robe made of linen, Daoist Li squeezed the rattan staff in his hand, clenched his jaws and said, "Master, junior brother, this is easy to handle. Many of Uncle Master Kuang's disciples are working in the pill workshop, and I'm in charge of them. I'll find some time to give them some mistakes, then punish them severely according to the sect rules." Daoist Li's pair of green eyes darted back and forth like a cat's. He clenched his jaws and said, "As long as we give them a slight accident when they are concocting pills, causing the pill cauldron to explode, they will be severely wounded even if they don't die from the explosion. Then, we'll charge them with carelessness in concocting pills and extravagance. The heart-cleaning pool at the back of the mountain will be waiting for them." Immortal Green Staff slapped Daoist Li's head forcefully and said with a smile, "That's what we'll do. Next month, you'll ask those rascals to concoct the Trigold Flaming Dragon Tiger Energy Explosion Pill. This is the pill that will cause the most serious explosion if something goes wrong. If we're going to explode, we'll make sure to do it with more force. What's the big deal if they are seriously wounded?" Immortal Green Staff clenched his teeth and said ferociously, "They can do it, but we can't. Lao Tzu has been holding back his anger for 100,000 years. Now, let's have a good competition with them, and let's see who can't beat the other." Standing off to a side with his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi raised his head and gave Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Li a look. He suddenly fell in love with these two old Taoists. Clearing his throat, Wu Wu Qi lowered his voice and said hypocritically, "But, ancestral master, uncle master, didn't the sect rules say that Yuanhua sect's disciples are strictly forbidden to do that to each other?" Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Li gave Wu Qi a glare at the same time, then cursed at the same time, "Sect rule my ass." They were taken aback at the same time. Immortal Green Staff cleared his throat and clasped his hands behind his back, putting on a dignified look. Daoist Li's eyes went wide as he pointed his finger at Patriarch Jiang Yun and said, "Sect rule is dead, but people are alive." If the sect rule is always effective, junior brother Jiang Yun would have become an inner sect disciple 100,000 years ago. Why would he be chased out of Yuanhua sect? Stroking his beard, Daoist Li smiled reservedly and said, "In short, the application of sect rule depends on your heart. It all depends on how you use it." Clang! The door of the house was kicked open with a loud thud. A tall and slender lady clad in a green palace dress walked into the house. Her face was veiled with a light veil, and her face could not be seen clearly. Every step she took was filled with an alluring charm. Immediately after that, the lady's voice, which sounded a little hollow and hoarse, rang out, "What? Are those people stirring up trouble on purpose? It has been 100,000 years, are they done with it? Daoist Min, that old pig, doesn't he care about his face anymore? I can marry whoever I want to marry. Is he still going to pester me?" She stomped her foot forcefully. Rumble. Greenwood Peak began to tremble violently. It was as if a large patch of forest near the foot of the mountain was struck by a thunderbolt. Several thousand towering trees were uprooted, and countless tree barks and wood chips were blasted tens of miles away. All the birds and beasts in the forest fled in panic, not daring to stay any longer near Greenwood Peak. Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Li bent their bodies at the same time in a nearly servile manner, carefully stepping forward to greet the lady. Immortal Green Staff called her wife with a flattering smile, while Daoist Li kept bowing and calling her master's wife with a flattering smile on his face. The green-clothed lady did not pay any attention to Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Li. Instead, she went straight before Patriarch Jiang Yun and gave him an appraising look. Suddenly, she sighed heavily and said, "Jiang Yunner, you did live up to my expectations in those years. You've chopped off White Sparrow's arm with just one sword strike. But, I've made things difficult for you, as you were chased out of the sect because of this. Here are a few immortal items that I've bought for you over the years. Take them and refine them." The green-clothed lady flipped her palm, and 3 lower-grade immortal items appeared before Patriarch Jiang Yun, glinting faintly. They were a sword, a shield, and a Taoist crown. Judging from the runes flashing and blinking on them from time to time, although they were only lower-grade immortal items, they were the best among all lower-grade immortal items. At least, the person who crafted them must have put in a lot of effort. Trembling, Patriarch Jiang Yun dropped to his knees and received the 3 immortal items respectfully. Disciple Jiang Yunner thanks Master's wife for the generous gift. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang followed Patriarch Jiang Yun and dropped to their knees as well. This fiery and shrewish lady was none other than Immortal Green Staff's dual cultivation partner, Goddess Green Melon. Many years ago, Daoist Min had taken a fancy to her, and had forced her to marry him. In the end, Goddess Green Melon ran away with Immortal Green Staff, slept with him, and succeeded in dual cultivation. It was a heavy slap on Daoist Min's face. The conflict between Daoist Qi and Daoist Min, and even Patriarch Jiang Yun's departure from Yuanhua sect, all started from this incident. But, he did not expect that Goddess Green Melon was still thinking about Patriarch Jiang Yun, and had even bought him 3 lower-grade immortal items. What Wu Qi saw in Eminent Cloud Sect's Luo Ling Pavilion was only a lower-grade immortal item, which proved that not everyone in Puyo Heavenly Realm could easily get their hands on an immortal item. Yet, Goddess Green Melon had been thinking about Patriarch Jiang Yun, and had prepared 3 immortal items for him over the past 100,000 years. It was a good thing to have a senior in the sect. Wu Qi took a deep breath. Suddenly, he found the feeling he had when he was with Wu Wang in those years. It was the warm feeling of being watched over and protected, and having someone to shelter him from the wind and rain. It was a good thing to have a senior in the sect. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip. He swore to himself that no matter who tried to destroy this warm feeling that he missed so much, no matter who it was, he would have to kill them. He bowed respectfully at Goddess Green Melon and said in a deep voice, "Disciple Wu Qi offers greeting, Grand Mistress." Goddess Green Melon hurried forward and pulled Patriarch Jiang Yun up, then helped Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu to their feet. She gave Wu Qi a look, nodded her head, and praised him. After that, she focused all her attention on Princess Zhang Lu and said, Zi Xian, this little girl is indeed a peerlessly beautiful girl. She is truly like a celestial being. Wu Qi is not a good match for you. But, as long as you like him, it's fine. Wu Qi was depressed by Goddess Green Melon's words, while Princess Zhang Lu gave him a complacent glance and chuckled softly. Goddess Green Melon's movement was a little too big, and brought up a gust of wind. The veil covering her face fluttered a little, and as he stood aside, Wu Qi happened to see half of Goddess Green Melon's face. Her facial bones were broken, and her face was full of bumps and hollows, like the sand in a river that had been hit by raindrops. It was a very ferocious look. Wu Qi gasped. Immortal Green Staff had told him that Goddess Green Melon's face was injured, and now that he saw it, it was indeed a very serious injury. No wonder this was the first time Goddess Green Melon came to see Patriarch Jiang Yun after he came to Greenwood Peak for so long. All girls cared a lot about their appearance. Presumably, Goddess Green Melon had been in a secluded cultivation these days, trying to heal the injury on her face. However, the injury was too serious, and unless she had an excellent healing spirit pill, it would be very difficult for her to fully recover. As for the 2 7th-grade immortal pills concocted by Patriarch Jiang Yun, he had given them to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Chapter 392. After setting up the restrictive spell, Wu Qi fished out the Dark Yin energy vase and cast a few incantation gestures into it, changing the restrictive spell in the vase. As long as it could absorb enough water element energy, it would be able to produce the Ling Yi True Water. As soon as Wu Qi activated the vase, its pale green body flickered with a bright light and gradually turned silver-white, with a few images of swaying daffodils emerging on its surface. As soon as Goddess Green Melon appeared, she dominated the atmosphere in the room. Immortal Green Staff bowed his head, Daoist Li dared not to raise his head, Patriarch Jiang Yun bowed his head respectfully, and Princess Zhang Lu could do nothing but listen. As Peppermint and Angelica were too young, they dared not to make a sound. There was no need to explain the importance girls attached to their appearance. After waiting on the tree for a few hours, the Dark Yin energy vase trembled slightly, and a stream of silver-white liquid filled with cold air and abundant energy rushed out. Hastily, Wu Qi used a jade vase to store the liquid. There were over 50 kilograms of Ling Yi True Water in the vase, enough to turn 80 to 100 ugly girls into stunning beauties. Although dragon pythons of fire and ice had a strong fleshly body like heavenly dragons, they were much more brutal and brutal. If dragons were the emperors of the scaled clans, then dragon pythons of fire and ice were the heroes of the scaled clans. If real dragons were to fight with dragon pythons of fire and ice, it would usually be the true dragons who would be defeated. Fairy Green Melon's face was injured by the starlight orb. Apart from using spirit pills and miraculous medicines to heal her injuries as soon as possible, he had another way to restore her appearance. The Dark Yin energy vase could absorb water element energy and transform it into 99 types of acquired water. Among these acquired waters, there was a type of Ling Yi True Water, which could especially nourish the Yin blood energy of a girl. It could maintain one's appearance, harmonize one's qi and blood, and provide a great support to female cultivators. Fairy Green Melon spoke very quickly. She sounded like a heavy machine gun, and there was a fiery crispness to her words. She gave Patriarch Jiang Yun 3 immortal items, then pulled Princess Zhang Lu aside and chatted for a while. At last, she rested her attention on Peppermint and Angelica. Apparently, she had learned about what happened to Peppermint and Angelica from other disciples. she comforted the two girls with a few words, then began cursing Priest Yun's disciples. Silverhorn stuck out his long tongue and licked one of his eyeballs, then murmured, "But, for the delicious, sweet, and intoxicating human flesh, brother, we have to cultivate hard. 10 days, just 10 days and we will be able to digest the food in our stomachs." Our cultivation should be able to reach the primordial spirit realm. Once we form our nascent divinities, we'll be able to inherit the secret arts of the dragon pythons of fire and ice in our bloodlines and begin our real cultivation. After Goldhorn and Silverhorn brothers were assigned, Wuqi grabbed Long Yuan and whispered with him for a while. According to Long Yuan, the space in the spirit breeding ring was getting more and more limited, as the cultivation base of Long Bow people was getting higher and higher, and their bodies were getting bigger and bigger. They needed more space. As Wuqi was not a heaven immortal now, he did not have the power to create his own world, so he could only keep expanding the spirit breeding ring. The clan of dragon pythons had their own divine abilities and mystic arts inherited from their bloodlines, and they were definitely not weaker than the body-tempering techniques of the dragons. Only now did Wuqi understand why Goldhorn and Silverhorn had only asked him about the cultivation of the dragon transformation script, but the brothers had never cultivated it. Goddess Green Melon was stunned for a moment, then she gave a cry of surprise, grabbed the jade bottle, and rushed out of the door. Perhaps, Goldhorn and Silverhorn were the last pair of dragon pythons of fire and ice in all the worlds, and the heavy responsibility of breeding and strengthening the clan of dragon pythons fell on their shoulders. Dragon pythons of fire and ice? Only now did Wuqi understand the origin of Goldhorn and Silverhorn. They were actually the legendary creatures. For dragon claws had grown out from under their stomachs, and 2 tumors the size of a human head had grown out from their backs. Wuqi tried to use his divine sense to see what was inside the tumors, but a pliable force blocked Wuqi's divine sense, preventing him from seeing through the mysteries inside. Goldhorn and Silverhorn's big heads were still in the shape of pythons, but they had dragon horns growing out from the top of their heads. Dragon pythons were strange creatures that resembled dragons and pythons, and their bloodlines were inextricably linked to dragons, but they were definitely not dragons. They could mate with any dragon or snake of the opposite sex, and every time they gave birth to 2, 4, 6, or 8 eggs, they would hatch into pairs of dragon pythons of fire and ice. Fortunately, Wuqi had brought countless materials with him, so it was not difficult for him to expand the spirit breeding ring. Therefore, he agreed to it without hesitation. The Dark Yin energy vase was indeed magical. Along with the changes of the restrictive spells inside, the surface of the vase would change accordingly. If it were not for the fact that it did not have an item spirit, it could be ranked as a spirit treasure. Even a peerlessly ugly girl like Mother Wuyan could turn into a peerless beauty like Diao Chan or Shishir by using Spirit Ripple True Water to clean her face. Not to mention that Fairy Green Melon was not ugly at all, and she was just wounded. With the Spirit Ripple True Water, she could forcibly adjust the position of the muscles and bones on her face, restoring her appearance to its original state. Therefore, Fairy Green Melon's criticism toward all the disciples of Daoist Min's clan was very sharp, and every word she said pointed to the key points, instead of some groundless nonsense. After scolding them for a while, Fairy Green Melon pulled Peppermint and Angelica's little hands, forcing Immortal Greenstaff to quickly think of a way to vent his anger, and he had to do it cleanly, venting all the anger that he had accumulated over the years. Wuqi gave his Grandmaster and Grandmaster Grandmother a look, who were deeply immersed in their schemes, then secretly gave Princess Zhanglu a wink, then sneaked out of the room. Wuqi liked Fairy Green Melon's personality very much, and he could feel the care and love she had for her disciples. Therefore, he had to find a way to restore her appearance to its original state. If such a bold and passionate girl could never show her true face to others, wouldn't it be a very cruel thing? Starting from Daoist Min, who was a disrespectful old man, to Daoist Green Peng, who was greedy and lustful, Daoist Yu He, who was cowardly and afraid of death, Daoist Bo Lao, who was wretched and immoral, and Daoist Mo Wan, who forsook morality at the sight of profit, Fairy Green Melon had scolded every single disciple of Daoist Min's clan. However, Her scolding was not without reason, but with reason and evidence. She seemed to know all the shameful things these people had done in a certain year, month, and day, and nothing could be hidden from her. Wu Qi smiled bitterly. He reached out his hand and injected a stream of pure blood energy into each of the two big fellows, helping them digest the burden in their stomachs. After that, he said, there is 1 month left until the life and death match between Yuanhua sect and Huiling sect. If you can join the match at that time, there will be 110 people waiting for you to eat. If you don't want to join the match, then forget it. Grand Mistress, I suddenly remembered that I found this spirit item in Shui Yuan planet, and I've specially presented it to you. Just like when they walked out of Great Yan's secret vault, the two brothers still had their stomachs bulging up, and wisps of flame and cold air could be seen coming out from the corners of their mouths as they stared straight at Wu Qi. Over the past 1 year, the two brothers had been eating and drinking in Great Yan's secret vault, and until today, they had not completely digested the demon cores and blood essences in their stomachs. With great difficulty, Gold Horn and Silver Horn raised their heads and said together, we will cultivate diligently. 1 month later, we will definitely be able to join the match. Fairy Green Melon clapped her hands and laughed out loud. Pulling Immortal Green Staff's hand, she began to carefully calculate with him. Wu Qi gave her the jade bottle, which was brimming with natural energy and emanated a cold air, then explained the effect of the Ling Yi True Water. However, their horns were different from the normal dragon horns. They had many forks, and each fork was extremely sharp like a sharp blade. Wisps of flame coiled around the gold horn's horn, emanating a scorching heat, while the silver horn's horn was surrounded by a silver cold wind, which made even Wu Qi feel a little uncomfortable. However, the reproduction rate of dragon pythons of fire and ice was many times weaker than that of dragons. On top of that, since the ancient times, dragons had been granted the title of Dragon Kings by the Celestial Court, which made them the rulers of all the water veins in all the worlds. Therefore, no one dared to attack dragons recklessly. On the other hand, the proud and unyielding dragon pythons of fire and ice did not give a second thought to the Celestial Court's attempts to recruit them. The immortals in the universe were more than happy to capture and kill them to craft magical treasures, capture them as mounts, or simply make them into delicious food. As a result, the dragons grew stronger day by day, while the dragon pythons of fire and ice had nearly gone extinct. However, the two brothers had undergone earth-shaking changes. Their bodies had doubled in length, and they were now nearly 200 feet long. The scales on their bodies had become much thicker, and each scale was in the shape of a hexagon. On the corner of each scale, there was a tiny rune that was faintly discernible. It was obvious that the ancestral bloodline in their bodies had been stimulated, and was gradually transforming their bodies. Burping, Gold Horn said in a disheveled manner, "It's been a long time since we felt so full. It's just that we don't want to digest the food in our stomachs so quickly. It's not that we can't digest them. It feels great to have a full stomach. Are you still looking down on the dragon transformation script?" Wu Qi murmured vaguely, then shoved the brothers back into the spirit breeding ring and said, "Cultivate carefully. 10 days later, I'll help you transcend your thunder tribulation." Are my demon pets allowed to participate in this match? I still have 10,000 longbow people here. Immortal Green Staff quickly stepped forward and carefully told them the plan he came up with Daoist Li just now. All the houses here were densely covered with various restrictive spells, so they did not have to worry that someone might eavesdrop on them. As the people in the house were his own people, Immortal Green Staff did not have to worry that someone might leak the secret. Therefore, he told them the plan he came up with just now, as well as all the detailed steps. From the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, Wu Qi took out a great amount of water element energy stones and shoved them into the vase. After that, he placed the vase on the branch in front of him and paid no attention to it. He touched the spirit breeding ring, and a beam of white light shot out from it. Gold Horn and Silver Horn fell down from the white light lazily, hanging themselves on the branch like dead snakes. After walking out from Patriarch Jiang Yun's abode, Wu Qi took a detour and came to a patch of woods at the back. He chose a tree that stood 1,000 feet tall, then flew up and sat down on one of the leafy branches. After that, he waved his hand, unleashing thousands of primordial runes that locked down the surrounding void. Unless it was a formidable expert who was proficient in the Tao of primordial runes like him, even if Patriarch Yuan Hua were to peep at them with his divine will, it would definitely alert Wu Qi. Chuckling, Wu Qi put away the vase and released the surrounding restrictive spells, then strode back into the abode. Chapter 393. After that, Patriarch Yuan Hua said, after the life and death match, it will be a life and death match between Patriarch and Reverend Huilin. The life and death match is related to the ownership of both Yuan Hua sect and Huiling sect, and it will decide the rise and fall of both great immortal sections. Therefore, Patriarch has to fight with all his might, even at the cost of his own life. Therefore, if Patriarch is unfortunately killed, cheer, you will take charge of Yuan Hua immortal sect. The rest of you must cooperate with us wholeheartedly to strengthen Yuan Hua sect. There is only 1 day left before the life and death match between our sect and Huiling sect. If our sect wins, we will be able to occupy the planet with the energy vein, and our overall strength will be further enhanced. For the next few days, all the disciples who will participate in the life and death match will stop their secluded cultivation and take a rest. It was only at this moment that Goddess Green Melon realized that she was still holding Wu Qi's ear. She let go abruptly, and in the next moment, she transformed from a raging mad woman into a dignified lady who was as quiet as still water. She nodded gently at Wu Qi, smiled, and said, "It is all thanks to the spirit water that Wu Qi has given me that my ancestral master's visage can be restored. In the future, if anyone dares to offend you in the sect, even if it is Uncle Master Min, Ancestral Master will definitely not let him off." Daoist Min openly tried to recruit Immortal Taiyu, but Immortal Taiyu straightforwardly rejected Daoist Min's invitation. Daoist Min's face turned dark. With a flick of his sleeve, he led his disciples into Patriarch Yuan Hua's Green Cliff cave abode, not even greeting Daoist Qi. Immortal Green Staff waved his hand and sprinkled a few layers of immortal light, adding tens of layers of restrictive spells on the inside and outside of the house. Wu Qi, Patriarch Jiang Yun, and Daoist Li came before Immortal Green Staff. 4 of them sat around a small square table, putting their heads together and murmuring in low voices with gloomy faces. They looked like a group of robbers in a marketplace, planning where to do business. Naturally, the target of their plan was none other than the disciples from Daoist Min's sect. Daoist Li stroked his beard and laughed as he said, "Junior nephew Wu Qi, it's good that you've gotten used to it. We need to come up with a good plan to teach them a lesson." When the plan was settled, Wu Qi lightly knocked on the table and said in a deep voice, "I need to send the parents of Peppermint and Angelica to Greenwood Peak." Wu Qi cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "Zi Xian's birth mother died suddenly during childbirth." Goddess Green Melon was taken aback. She put her arms around Princess Zhanglu and said with a smile, "Zi Xian, where is your mother?" But today, Immortal Taiyu suddenly expressed his goodwill towards Daoist Qi. He openly and forcefully punished his disciple who had made a mistake, expelled the master of Spirit Medicine Hall, Daoist White Sparrow, and then paid a visit to Daoist Qi. Qi had gained the support from Immortal Hua, Immortal Min, Hua, and Sect, and Imist Immortal Ming. Dao, and Tai Hua Tiangong's clan, and clan was Hua, Daoist Abo, Sect, 1, and Tai Hua Sect, and of Mountain, and clan, and Hua, and Sect, Tai, of Sect, and of Dao has. Along with Patriarch Yuan Hua's voice, a faint ringing of a golden bell reverberated through the clouds, shaking the surrounding trees and making them rustle. Wu Qi gave Daoist White Sparrow a deep look, and Daoist White Sparrow happened to turn his head to look at him. Therefore, Wu Qi saw the deep resentment in Daoist White Sparrow's eyes, as well as his determination to kill Wu Qi until he was dead. Just 2 hours later, Goddess Green Melon rushed into the hall while shouting and yelling, grabbing Wu Qi's ear. Together with Daoist Qi, 4 heaven immortals, led by Immortal Taiyu, came rushing to Green Cliff Mountain. Daoist Qi rose to his feet, then dropped to his knees and bowed deeply. Yes, sect master. Immortal Taiyu smiled faintly, shaking his head and saying, we'll talk again when we're free. Patriarch Yuanhua did not show himself today. Although he was sitting in his cottage, his voice echoed throughout the entire small cave abode. The more spirit ripple true water a girl absorbed, the closer her appearance would be to the female template recognized by the great Tao of heaven and earth. Naturally, her appearance would be more beautiful, and her attraction to the opposite sex would be stronger. As Goddess Green Melon's face was wounded by a magical treasure, she had consumed a great amount of blood essence and energy. As a result, she could not restore her appearance in a short period of time, and could only wear a veil when meeting others. The spirit ripple true water could replenish the essence blood and vitality she had lost, and it could also adjust her aura. Immortal Green Staff laughed and said, Green Melon has always been like this. She is too lazy to teach disciples, but she does not like male disciples either. She has been tormenting Greenwood Peak all day long. Now that we have Xian, Peppermint, and Angelica, we can finally have some peaceful days. After that, Patriarch Yuanhua went on to give out many orders, from what Yuanhua sect had to do after the victory, to the retreat route if Yuanhua sect was defeated. He explained all the details in a very clear and meticulous manner, without leaving any loopholes. Wu Qi could not help but admire Patriarch Yuanhua inwardly. He was indeed the ancestral master who had single-handedly made Yuanhua sect one of the 10 great sects in Puyo Heavenly Realm. His management skill was top-notch. Suddenly, a beam of cloud came rushing over from a corner. It was Daoist Qi, bringing a group of disciples. Under Daoist Qi, there was Immortal Green Staff, the eldest senior brother, and Yellowbeard, Lady Green Plum, and Goddess Green Melon, 3 heaven immortal disciples. In terms of the number of eldest senior disciples, they were more than enough to match Daoist Min. However, apart from Immortal Green Staff, who had 2 heaven immortal disciples, Daoist Li and Patriarch Jiang Yun, Yellowbeard and the other 2 heaven immortal disciples, they only had 2 heaven immortal disciples. Therefore, the overall strength of Daoist Qi's disciples was slightly weaker than Daoist Min. Oh my, Wu Qi's grand disciple, what is this treasure you have? Goddess Green Melon had taken off her veil, revealing an extraordinarily beautiful face that exuded a heroic spirit. Her face seemed to be covered by a thin layer of water vapor. It was hazy and faintly discernible, but it set off a few traces of feminine beauty in addition to her heroic spirit. She was like a whirlpool in a drowning pool. As long as one looked at her, one's gaze would be deeply sucked in. But, it was a pity that some of his disciples were not very promising. Wu Qi tilted his head and looked at Goddess Green Melon with a wry smile. When they arrived at Green Cliff Mountain, Daoist Min, who was on the brink of death, happened to bring a group of disciples down from the cloud. Together with Mo Wan, Green Peng, Jade Crane, and Shrike, Daoist White Sparrow and 4 other Heaven Immortal disciples, there were a total of 10 Heaven Immortals from Daoist Min's branch, which accounted for 30% of all the Heaven Immortals in Yuanhua sect. With her head held high, Goddess Green Melon pulled Princess Zhang Li's hand and walked out of the door in high spirits. Peppermint and Angelica timidly kowtowed to Wu Qi, then hastily caught up with Princess Zhang Lu, grabbing Princess Zhang Li's sleeves like a shadow. When Princess Zhang Lu saw what Wu Qi was doing, the anger in her heart calmed down immediately. She smiled sweetly and gently held Goddess Green Melon's hand, praising, "You are indeed a peerless beauty, and also a valiant warrior." When Yi Lu saw you, he felt like he was seeing his own mother. Suddenly, Princess Zhang Li's eyes turned red. No matter what kind of grudges they had, the fact that Daoist White Sparrow had placed his revenge on Peppermint and Angelica, 2 young girls with weak cultivation bases that were no different from ordinary mortals, had crossed some boundaries. According to Wu Qi's plan, regardless of whether they were from the same sect or the sect rules, he would definitely teach Daoist Min's branch a severe lesson. He would make them feel the pain, and he did not mind killing a few Heaven Immortals from Daoist Min's branch as a warning. Wu Qi was taken aback. He spread his arms and sighed innocently at Immortal Green Staff. Daoist Qi smiled faintly and shook his head, then brought the group of disciples and walked into the hall. After cupping his fist and thanking Goddess Green Melon, Wu Qi told her about the magical function of the Ling Yi True Water. The Ling Yi True Water was best at nurturing a thread of innate yin energy in female cultivators. The more innate yin energy a woman possessed, the more graceful and beautiful she would be. Therefore, unless she possessed some extremely special spirit root or innate talent, the better the aptitude of a woman, the more beautiful she would be. Upon hearing that the Ling Yi True Water was especially useful for women, Immortal Green Staff, Daoist Li, and Patriarch Jiang Yun lost all interest. However, Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat, as he sensed two hostile gazes staring at him. Gingerly, he gave them a sideways glance, and sure enough, it was Princess Xianglu, who was staring at him with eyes bursting with flames of fury. Wu Qi forced a smile, his lips twitching upward as he gave Princess Xianglu a meaningful glance. Goddess Green Melon cried out excitedly, "What a wonderful treasure! Not only can it restore my appearance, it can also replenish my innate yin energy. My greenwood spirit root was originally an upper-tier spirit root, but now, it has become a supreme-tier spirit root, and even my immortal soul has become stronger and tougher. It is almost equal to the cultivation base that I've acquired after 10,000 years of arduous cultivation. What exactly is this wonderful treasure?" Upon hearing Patriarch Yuanhua's words, Daoist Qi, Immortal Green Staff, and Patriarch Jiang Yun rose to their feet and answered respectfully, "Yes." An acquired true water like the Ling Yi True Water could nourish female cultivators by replenishing their innate yin energy, allowing their aura, blood essence, body shape, and appearance to be closer to the female template recognized by the great Tao of heaven and earth. And, that template was the most perfect woman recognized by the great Tao of heaven and earth. Without wasting any time, Wu Qi and his company stepped onto clouds and flew towards Green Cliff Mountain. Goddess Green Melon walked at the front with her head held high, as if she was afraid that no one could see that her appearance had been restored. Daoist Li nodded and praised, "What martial nephew Wu Qi said is right. Let's remove all the worries first, and only then can we do what we need." Immortal Green Staff and Daoist Li looked dejected, while Goddess Green Melon pulled Princess Xianglu to her feet, sighed and said, "I see. My good grandson, Wu Qi, has made me happy today. But, I can't give him any benefits. Zi Xian, Peppermint, and Angelica, come with me. I have some good things here, and I can give them to you girls. Daoist Li and these stinky Daoists must not be taken advantage of." Daoist Min's face darkened. He gave Daoist Qi a look, then clenched his jaws and dropped to his knees, saying in a deep voice, "We dare not disobey you." Wu Qi was instantly enraged. This fellow really doesn't know what's good for him. Goddess Green Melon gave Daoist Min a cold look, whose face was as gloomy as still water, then gave a cold snort. After that, she bowed to Daoist Qi and Immortal Taiyu. Daoist Min's face turned even uglier. "Junior brother Taiyu," he said in a deep voice, "if you have time, come visit my barren mountain." Chapter 394. Gradually, Wu Qi's face turned serious. 108 bolts of lightning had struck down from the heavenly tribulation of dragon pythons of fire and ice, and it had not stopped yet. Although each of the lightning bolts only slightly injured Goldhorn and Silverhorn, the brothers were already riddled with scars after 108 minor injuries, and they had consumed more than half of the pills to replenish their strength. Hovering in midair, Wu Qi looked quietly at the brothers. Pop! 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 4 thunderous booms could be heard. The meatball behind the two brothers suddenly blasted open, and 4 nearly 300-meter-long wings spread. The enormous wings were covered with densely packed gold and silver scales. When the wings flapped, a large expanse of dazzling talisman light surged in the air. The heat wave brought by the wings instantly melted the small hill, and the cold air that followed froze the small hill that had just melted into an ice cube. Dragon pythons of fire and ice looked like a dragon, but not a dragon, like a python, but not a python. After devouring so many demon cores and blood essences from Great Yan's secret vault, the brothers had reached the threshold of advancement. After cultivating their nascent divinity and compressing the blood essence in their bodies, the brothers would immediately inherit the inherited memories in their bloodline, and possess extraordinary divine abilities. Dragon Pythons of Fire and Ice. Wu Qi was looking forward to the performance of this ancient species. Just as Wu Qi rose to his feet, wondering how he could help them, the brothers suddenly widened their eyes, threw their heads back, and let out a long roar. Spirit breeding rings were used by cultivators to store their demon pets, various goo worms, and other living creatures. The principle was similar to that of a storage ring, but at the same time, it was not quite the same. The storage ring had a vast space, but the time was frozen, so it could store all kinds of spirit herbs and pills without losing their spirituality over time. However, the spirit breeding ring was equivalent to a small world. The natural energy in it was constantly communicating with the outside world, and the flow of time was the same as the outside world. Therefore, living creatures could hide in the ring. Before the brothers could digest the power contained in the lightning bolt, the tribulation cloud in the sky trembled, and another lightning bolt, thicker than the previous one, came crashing down. The two brothers soared into the sky, opened their mouths wide, and swallowed the tribulation lightning into their stomachs. Then, they twisted their bodies and fell to the ground in a sorry state. With a mysterious smile on his face, Wu Qi fished out a jar of sticky, pitch-black ointment from the black dragon's spirit ring. With a shake of his hand, the ointment transformed into two fountains and shot into Goldhorn and Silverhorn's mouths. The two serpents, who had exhausted their strength, immediately regained their spirit. They gritted their teeth and tortured their bodies, trying to break free from the tough snakeskin cage. Swoosh! Swoosh! Several dozens of swishing noises rang out as all the heaven immortals in Yuanhua sect arrived at the scene with teleportation. The transparent wings were flapping lightly. Looking at Goldhorn and Silverhorn, the hassock of great ocean dividing serpent, he nodded and said, "Dragon pythons of fire and ice? Their numbers are 100 times fewer than our great divide, aren't they? Back then, it was also a tyrannical race that once dominated the world, tsk. Again, and again, and again, Wu Qi simply sat cross-legged on the ground and shouted, "You can only rely on yourselves. Hang in there." Goldhorn and Silverhorn flew up at the same time. They opened their mouths and bit down on the thunderbolt, splitting it into two and swallowing it into their stomachs. Crack! A loud noise rang out as the tattered snakeskins on their bodies exploded at the same time. Countless scales scattered in all directions, and the brothers fell heavily to the ground, struggling and rolling in agony. Their newly regenerated snakeskins were shivering rapidly, expanding and growing rapidly. Gradually, the scales on their skin hardened, and numerous profound runes emerged on their surfaces. Looking at Hassock, Wu Qi smiled and said, "With me around, their race will thrive again." Goldhorn and Silverhorn curled up their bodies at the same time. Goldhorn opened his mouth and breathed out a stream of cold air, smashing heavily onto Silverhorn's body. Silverhorn also breathed out a clump of flame, smashing heavily onto Goldhorn's body. Then, both brothers breathed out the power of tribulation that they could not withstand, asking their brother to use his innate divine ability to neutralize it. Meanwhile, the cold air from Goldhorn and the flame from Silverhorn were the energy they needed to form their dragon python souls and temper their dragon python bodies respectively. While rubbing the spirit breeding ring, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "It will be best if I can bring my demon pets with me, hee." Flapping their fleshy wings, the brothers flew up into the sky and entered the tribulation cloud, using their strong bodies to absorb the power of tribulation. One tribulation thunderbolt after another kept smashing onto their bodies. A strong light radiated from their bodies, and a frightening aura spread thousands of miles away. However, the materials used to make spirit breeding rings were becoming rarer and rarer in the current world of cultivators. Therefore, an ordinary spirit breeding ring was only about 10 feet in size. If word of Wu Qi's spirit breeding ring, which could accommodate 10,000 longbow men, were spread out, it would be enough to scare a large number of people, and perhaps even those heaven immortals would not be able to restrain themselves from snatching it. On the contrary, those mighty figures at the level of gold immortal and above would not be greedy for it. After all, gold immortals were able to carry the small world they created with them, which was much stronger than the spirit breeding ring. The cold wind and the hot airflow ravaged the ground tens of miles in circumference, turning the ground into a lake of lava one moment, then a tundra the next. In just a few breaths of time, the forest within tens of miles had turned into the finest dust. Hasek was struck dumb. He gave Wu Qi a deep look, then nodded and said, "Perhaps." Shaking his head, Hasek remembered the confident smile on Wu Qi's face, then turned and flew back into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, continuing to sleep in the boundless ocean, quietly absorbing the innate water energy produced in Wu Qi's body. The roar sounded like that of a dragon, yet not at the same time. It was deep and resounding, with a hint of ferocity and brutality. If the roar of a dragon was said to be pearls and gems, then the roar of the brothers was a crystal ball that was fully covered with sharp thorns, glinting dazzlingly yet deadly. Goldhorn and Silverhorn's bodies trembled slightly. Suddenly, they opened their mouths and sprayed out a stream of flame and a stream of cold air towards Daoist Mo Wan. It was the Fire and Ice Thunder Tribulation, unique to the clan of dragon pythons of fire and ice. Just like other innately powerful creatures, when the experts from various clans, such as dragons, phoenixes, and Chilans improved their cultivation base or underwent a metamorphosis, they would always be struck by a thunder tribulation unique to their own clan. The Fire and Ice Thunder Tribulation was exactly the same. The power of the thunder contained the opposite attributes of firmness and softness, scorching and bitter coldness. It was a thunder tribulation that was extremely difficult to guard against. Goldhorn and Silverhorn shook their big heads together, throwing their heads back and letting out a long roar. Their bodies nearly straightened up, like two huge trees facing the sky, supporting their bodies with only the tips of their tails. They opened their mouths, which measured nearly 10 feet in circumference, and aimed at the thunderclouds in the sky, assuming a posture as if they were going to devour everything. The newly grown snakeskins on the brothers' bodies shone with a faint glow. Streams of red and white light rippled out from them, gradually fusing into their bodies. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were lying lazily on the ground, their sharp claws feebly tearing their badly mutilated bodies. Their bodies were covered in bloody wounds, long wounds that ripped open their scales. Large pieces of gold and silver scales were hanging around the wounds in a messy manner. A few loud clangs rang out as Goldhorn knocked his forehead against the ground, bringing up a large number of fire sparks. The snakeskin on his forehead cracked, exposing the newly grown skin underneath that was milky white mixed with a hint of pale gold. Meanwhile, Silverhorn opened his mouth wide and bit a piece of broken skin on his body with his sharp fangs. As he shook his head over and over again, the crack on his skin grew bigger and bigger, exposing a large patch of new, silvery skin. Cracking noises kept ringing out from under their thick scales. Their bodies were growing, their bones were growing thicker and longer, and their muscles were becoming thicker and stronger. But, their snakeskins had restricted their further development. They could only tear the snakeskins themselves, freeing their bodies from this natural cage. They had consumed a great deal of physical strength and energy. Their claws tore the snakeskins and produced shrill noises of friction. Their bodies wriggled slightly, and from time to time, flames and cold gleams sprayed out of their mouths. Stroking the spirit breeding ring, Wu Qi was once again reminded of the question he had last time: are demon pets allowed to be brought into the duel? Isn't it a little too much to bring two nascent divinity realm dragon pythons of fire and ice into the duel, with 10,000 longbow men ready to help at any time? Amidst the long and sonorous roars, the brothers' bodies expanded to about 1,000 feet long. Together with the huge, oddly shaped wings on their backs, they looked mighty and ferocious, like two fearsome ancient extraordinary beasts. Their claws had grown out as well. The 4 claws under their abdomens were similar to dragon claws, but they had one more joint, which made them much thicker, more agile, and more lethal. Their heads still looked like great pythons, but the dragon horns on their heads were bigger and more forked, and the cold wind and heat streams coiling around them made it harder for anyone to approach them. However, if Goldhorn and Silverhorn wanted to cultivate their nascent divinity, they would need the help of the thunder tribulation of ice and fire. They had to absorb and digest the unique fire and ice energy contained in the thunder tribulation, fusing them into their souls. Only then could they form their nascent divinity. If Wu Qi were to help them resist the thunder tribulation at this moment, the brothers would never be able to make any progress in their entire lives. Looking at the brothers hovering midair absorbing the thunder tribulation, Taoist Mo Wan was both surprised and envious. Why are these two beasts so fierce? He cursed under his breath. 10 days after Yuanhua sect assembly, Wu Qi was seen hovering midair on top of a small hill surrounded by craggy rocks behind Green Cliff Mountain. Looking at the tribulation clouds in the sky, Wu Qi frowned as he flew tens of miles backward. Gold horn, silver horn, he said in a deep voice, Gold horn, silver horn, be careful. When you run out of stamina, consume some pills immediately to replenish your energy and blood. Wu Qi had prepared a great amount of pills for the brothers in advance. As long as Goldhorn and Silverhorn were not too careless, and the thunder tribulation did not kill them completely in one go, it would not be difficult for them to transcend the thunder tribulation. For a moment, red and white gleams were flashing on the brothers' bodies, while cold air and hot wind were spreading in all directions. The rocks on the small hill could not withstand the rapid change of heat and cold, and exploded and shattered one after another. Right at this moment, a very faint thunderclap echoed out from the sky, as a red and white thunderbolt came whistling down. The bestial aura emanating from Goldhorn and Silverhorn's bodies grew stronger and stronger. It was as if a baby had grown into a burly man who stood over 10 feet tall and was burly with muscles all over his body. Their aura had become completely different from before. Guided by their aura, a thin layer of red cloud came wheeling slowly down from the sky. Amidst the cloud, numerous red thunderbolts as fine as hair and white cold air were seen rolling and tangling with each other. Piece after piece of snakeskin was ripped off by the brothers, while the aura emanating from their bodies grew stronger and stronger. An ancient bestial aura was vaguely spreading out from their bodies, while the gleam in their eyes grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, Wu Qi felt a chill on his forehead. The item spirit of Darkeen Hasuk was startled by the aura, and sprung out from Wu Qi's body in surprise. But, I don't think any other cultivator has a spirit breeding ring with such a huge space, right? Chapter 395. No one expected that Goldhorn and Silverhorn would attack just because of Taoist Mo Wan's malicious words. However, dragon pythons of fire and ice were the most ferocious creatures under the heaven. In their eyes, apart from Wu Qi, everyone else was no different than their food. After the baptism of the thunder tribulation of ice and fire, the two brothers had recovered the inherited memories of the dragon pythons of ice and fire in their bloodlines. They had also inherited the dragon pythons of ice and fire's ferocity and unreasonable arrogance. Since Taoist Mo Wan dared to curse them, there was no reason for them not to attack. Every time they attacked, they would unleash a killing strike without showing any mercy. Like two comets, the 1,000 feet long red beam and the other white beam intertwined and shot across the sky, producing a shrill and unpleasant whistling noise. The noise went straight into Yuanhua sect's spiritual ocean, sounding like the howling of evil spirits from hell. It shook the souls of all the heaven immortals of Yuanhua sect in the surroundings. Even Patriarch Jiang Yun and Daoist Li, who were 36th tier heaven immortals, nearly had their immortal souls shaken out from their bodies. Daoist Mo Wan's face fell. Damn beasts, he bellowed furiously. With a wave of his right hand, a sheet of dark light flew out, transforming into an exquisite shield that measured about 1 foot in circumference. A large sheet of dark light and green smoke emanated from the shield, wrapping around his body. It was Taoist Mo Wan's proudest magical treasure, an immortal item grade defensive shield, the Smoke One Shield. It was crafted using the earth core crimson flame dark copper, and during the crafting process, Daoist Mo1 was lucky enough to obtain the soul of an extraordinary bird that possessed the bloodline of Wuan and Phoenix as its item spirit. As a result, the shield possessed an extraordinary sentience and an outstanding defensive strength. Furthermore, when he wielded the Smoke Wuan shield, it was as if he had grown a pair of wings. His flying speed and dexterity were doubled. Therefore, not only did the Smoke Wuan shield have an outstanding defensive strength, it was also a great help to Daoist Mo1 in fights of magical powers. Wrapped in the dark light and green smoke, Daoist Mo1 tilted his body slightly to one side, and instantly moved several hundred feet away like a fish. According to the trajectory of the red and white lights, his casual evasion was enough to make Goldhorn and Silverhorn's attacks miss. It showed his uniqueness in the immortal technique and his outstanding vision. Only by evading in such a way could he show his status. However, Goldhorn and Silverhorn were ancient mutated dragon pythons of fire and ice. How could their attacks be dodged so easily? Swish! The red and white beams vanished abruptly, as they teleported right before Daoist Mo1 and smashed forcefully onto the Smoke Wuan shield. A long cry that sounded like that of a dragon, yet not a dragon, rang out, followed by a sharp and melodious cry of a bird. The Smoke Wuan shield shone with a blinding light, and a large sheet of green light burst out. Daoist Mo1 gave a muffled snort as he was knocked flying away by the red and white light. Like a cannonball, he shot up over 100 miles into the sky. A series of clashing noises echoed out as the red and white light shattered inch by inch when they collided with the Smoke Wuan shield. Every inch of the red and white light would burst into a large sheet of red flame and countless cold gleams. When the flame and cold gleams collided, it was as if a vast ocean had plunged into a volcano in the Earth's core. Fire and water could not tolerate each other, resulting in a violent explosion. The power of each explosion was comparable to a heavenly thunderbolt. Although Daoist Mo1 had a profound cultivation base, he was still shaken by the explosions, and his blood and energy were roiling, while his immortal soul was nearly ripped out of his body by the constant dragon roars. Hiss! Hiss! By now, Goldhorn and Silverhorn had absorbed all the thunder tribulation in the tribulation cloud into their bodies. Their dragon python nascent divinities had reached the phenomenal stage, and they had also obtained the mystic cultivation technique of dragon pythons of fire and ice in their bloodline, the dragon python dark scripture. It was a divine ability that allowed them to cultivate both their fleshly body and nascent divinity at the same time, and eventually, their fleshly body would turn into a saint. In the ancient times, the clan of dragon pythons of fire and ice relied on the dragon python dark scripture to dominate the world, even suppressing the dragons and becoming the leader of the scaled clan. At that time, the supreme experts of the dragon pythons of fire and ice could even eat divine dragons as food, ancient golden immortals as desserts, and ancient celestials as snacks. This showed how powerful the dragon python mystic scripture was. The brothers spread their fleshy wings and flapped them violently, bringing up a sheet of red light and a gust of cold wind. They let out long and sonorous roars as their scales opened and closed, while the enormous dragon python energies in their bodies were rolling rapidly along the meridians recorded in the dragon python dark scripture. Like two black holes, the brothers were rapidly absorbing the surrounding natural energies and converting them into new dragon python energies. Dragon pythons were greedy and brutal by nature, and the same was true for their cultivation technique. If one were to say that immortal cultivators still had to consider the harmony between heaven and earth, the core of dragon python's cultivation technique was only one thing: plunder, plunder, plunder until the pond was dry. Devour, devour, devour without any taboo. As the brothers unleashed their power, the energy veins under the back of Green Cliff Mountain rocked violently, while the natural energies in the underground veins turned into raging tides that could be seen with naked eyes and rushed into the brothers' bodies. Their cultivation base grew rapidly, and the newly born dragon python energies quickly filled their new bodies, which had expanded to about 1,000 feet long. Their strength grew stronger and stronger, and as their overall strength grew, their ability to absorb natural energies became stronger as well. Amidst wild roars, Gold Horn and Silver Horn flapped their wings ferociously, transforming into two beams of light that chased after Taoist Mo Wan. Their fangs were clenched so tightly that they produced cracking noises, while saliva was dripping down from the corners of their mouths. It looked like they were very hungry for Taoist Mo Wan. When Gold Horn's saliva dripped on the ground, each drop of it melted the ground within a radius of 1,000 feet into lava, while Silver Horn's saliva turned a small hill into an iceberg. The surrounding heaven immortals looked at each other with great astonishment. When had they ever seen such ferocious and strange pythons? Meanwhile, Taoist Qi and Taoist Min had turned to look at Wu Qi. They knew that Gold Horn and Silver Horn were Wu Qi's demon pets, and Wu Qi had brought them to the back of the mountain, preparing to transcend their thunder tribulation. Taoist Qi could not help but grin and say, "It seems there is no rule against bringing demon pets during the match." Although Taoist Min did not get along well with Taoist Qi, this was a matter that concerned the foundation and future of Yuanhua sect. Upon hearing Taoist Qi's words, Taoist Min nodded and said, "That's right, that's right. These two dragon pythons are as strong as a few nascent divinity cultivators. If nothing goes wrong, we will definitely win this match." Both men exchanged a glance, and with a tacit understanding, they did not summon Taoist Mo Wan, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn back. Taoist Qi wished that Gold Horn and Silver Horn would give Taoist Mo Wan a good beating, while Taoist Min was pondering whether Taoist Mo Wan could kill these two dragon pythons. Although this was an important matter related to the match, Yuanhua sect still had a great chance of winning with or without these two dragon pythons. Therefore, it was better to let Mo Wan kill these two beasts. Taoist Mo Wan's body trembled violently as the powerful red and white light finally dissipated. He was so angry that he let out a strange laugh and cursed, "What a pair of beasts. Beasts. I'll definitely teach you a good lesson today." The dazzling smoke Wan shield sprayed out a burst of dark gleam and green smoke, as Taoist Mo Wan gracefully sped through the air, leaving tens of afterimages behind as he quickly approached Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who were leaping towards him. Taoist Mo Wan had the intention to show off his movement technique. With the help of the smoke Wan shield, his movement technique was agile and quick, without any hesitation. He was like a feather gliding amidst a strong wind, and when he turned and turned, even the divine will of ordinary heaven immortals could not locate his exact location. A movement technique like this gave him a great advantage in a fight of magical powers. No one could locate Taoist Mo Wan, and none of their magical spells, flying swords, or magical treasures could hit him. On the other hand, he could attack his enemies with ease, which naturally gave him a great advantage. But today, this advantage was completely ineffective in front of Gold Horn and Silver Horn. Dragon pythons of fire and ice had all sorts of magical features in their strong fleshly bodies, one of which was their incredible vision. As long as Gold Horn and Silver Horn focused their attention on their eyes, they could see even the transmission of photons clearly. They could even see through the teleportation of an immortal's body in different dimensions when he was teleporting. As for the strongest ancient dragon pythons of fire and ice, their eyes could even go back in time and see what had happened in the past. Aided by their incredible eyesight, both brothers could see every single detail of Taoist Mo Wan's body. Nevertheless, Gold Horn and Silver Horn were very cunning. They pretended to be flustered by Taoist Mo Wan's unpredictable afterimages, hooking their tails together and forming a ring-shaped protective circle with their wings. Their big claws were tucked under their abdomens, and their big heads were glancing around in panic, while wisps of flame and streams of cold air kept bursting out of their mouths. Taoist Mo Wan had forgotten that just like the other immortals of Yuanhua sect, he was severely wounded at the moment, and his overall strength was only less than 30% of his peak state. His current magical power and divine abilities were only equal to an ordinary 36th tier heaven immortal. On top of that, he could not fight with all his might, as once he used too much immortal energy, his already stabilized injuries would flare up immediately. Even under such circumstances, Taoist Mo Wan still wasted his immortal energy wantonly, showing off his magical and unpredictable movement technique as he gracefully approached Gold Horn and Silver Horn. Suddenly, Daoist Min's voice rang out in Daoist Mo Wan's mind, "My disciple, kill these two beasts. You have a good excuse to kill them since they attacked you first." Upon hearing Daoist Min's voice, Daoist Mo Wan's eyes lit up. He opened his mouth and shot out a white flying sword shaped like a sparrow's beak. It transformed into a curved beam of light and shot gracefully towards the vital spots between Goldhorn and Silverhorn's brows. Last time, Daoist Mo Wan's flying sword was destroyed by Patriarch Jiang Yun, and Wu Qi had snatched its remains and fed it to the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. The flying sword Daoist Mo Wan was using now was an immortal item-grade flying sword, which Daoist Min had spent a lot of effort to buy for him. However, although it was an immortal item-grade flying sword, it was much weaker than his original flying sword in terms of both power and intelligence. Right when the sword beam shot out, Goldhorn and Silverhorn's bodies suddenly turned blurry. Without any preparation, the brothers teleported right next to Daoist Mo Wan's true form. The sword beam brushed past their bodies, not harming them at all. Their heads and tails joined each other, forming a circle that trapped Daoist Mo Wan within. Then, they thrust their huge claws out, bringing together a large sheet of raging flame and a cold gleam as they slapped viciously onto Daoist Mo Wan's body. Like an iron hammer smashing a rubber ball, the brothers' huge claws slapped viciously onto the dazzling green smoke that protected Daoist Mo Wan's body, sending him flying all over the sky. He waved his arms and legs and could no longer keep his balance. After a few tens of violent attacks, the Smoke One shield actually exploded with a loud crack. Goldhorn thrust his tail, which was covered with razor-sharp scales and stood erect like blades, and smashed forcefully onto Daoist Mo Wan's chest. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.